What if everything you see, hear, and touch is a lie? What if time isn't moving, space isn't real, and you've never truly woken up? From ancient dreams to quantum illusions, these paradoxes don't just question the world, they pull it apart. By the end of this video, you may never see reality the same way again. Or worse, you might start to wonder if you ever saw it at all. Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine a world where everything you know is a shadow, dancing on a wall. Your entire reality is shaped by those shifting shapes, and you never think to question them. You were born in a dark cave, shackled by the legs and neck, unable to turn your head. The only view you've ever had is the wall in front of you, lit by a fire behind and populated by silhouettes that flicker endlessly. Behind you, figures move along a walkway, holding up objects and speaking, their echoes bouncing off the walls. But you don't see them. You only see the shadows they cast. And to you, that is all there is. That is your truth. That is your world. This, Plato tells us, is the condition of the average human soul. We are prisoners in a cave of illusion, mistaking appearance for reality. The cave is not literal, but symbolic, an image of our ignorance. The chains that bind us are not physical, but mental and emotional. They are our fears, beliefs, assumptions, and habits. The shadows on the wall represent the world of sensory experience, the fleeting and imperfect reflections of deeper truths we rarely perceive. And the fire behind us is the source of those illusions of false light that keeps us hypnotized. To Plato, real knowledge is not found in what we see, but in what we understand beneath the surface. Now imagine that one prisoner is freed. At first, the experience is painful. His limbs ache. His eyes sting from the brightness of the fire he's never seen before. He turns around for the first time in his life and realizes the shadows weren't reality at all, they were mere projections. He's bewildered, angry, confused. Everything he thought was true turns out to be false. But curiosity drives him further. He is pulled, perhaps reluctantly, toward the mouth of the cave. The light grows stronger. He ascends upward, step by step, toward a world he never imagined could exist. As he emerges from the cave, sunlight floods his senses. At first, he is blinded. He can't make sense of the trees, the sky, or the people. But slowly he begins to see. First shadows, then reflections in water, and finally the objects themselves. He sees the sun, the source of all light and life, and he realizes the truth. The world inside the cave was a lie. The shadows were poor imitations of reality. Out here, under the open sky, he sees what is real, not just what is perceived. This is what Plato calls the world of forms, a realm of perfect, eternal truths that lie beyond the senses. The allegory is not just a story about philosophy. It is a story about awakening, about enlightenment, about what it means to truly know. The cave is comfortable, familiar. It's easier to accept the world of shadows than to challenge your assumptions. But truth requires effort. It requires struggle. Plato believed that most people never leave the cave because they fear the discomfort of the journey. They are content with illusion. They don't want their beliefs shaken. They prefer the known, even if it's false, to the unknown, even if it's true. But here's the twist. The freed prisoner doesn't stay in the light forever. He feels a sense of duty, a desire to return to the cave and free the others. He descends back into the darkness, trying to tell the remaining prisoners that there is more to the world than what they see. But they laugh at him. They think he's gone mad. His eyes, now adjusted to the sunlight, can't see in the dimness of the cave. He stumbles. He fumbles. And they use this as proof that his journey was meaningless. Look, they say, he left and now he can't even see what's right in front of him. If they could, they'd kill anyone who tried to pull them out. This reaction is chilling. It reveals the resistance people have to truth. When confronted with something that challenges their worldview, people often attack the messenger. Plato suggests that society punishes those who attempt to enlighten others. Think of Socrates, Plato's own teacher, who was executed for corrupting the youth and questioning the gods. The allegory of the cave is, in many ways, Plato's defense of Socrates. The philosopher, he argues, is not dangerous. He is a liberator. But liberation is not always welcomed. Ignorance can be a warm, familiar blanket that people cling to, even as it suffocates them. So what does it mean to leave the cave today? It might mean questioning your beliefs, turning off the television, stepping away from social media, reading difficult books, having conversations that challenge your assumptions, looking inward, seeking meaning, becoming aware of how your perceptions are shaped by culture, bias, and fear. It means admitting you don't know everything, and maybe never will. It means being okay with uncertainty. And more than that, it means choosing truth over comfort, reality over illusion, freedom over familiarity. Plato's allegory is also a metaphor for education. True education, he says, is not about filling the mind with information, it's about turning the soul around. It's not about pouring knowledge into an empty vessel, but about awakening the inner eye, the eye of reason, to see beyond appearances. This turning is difficult. It's painful, but it is necessary. For Plato, the highest goal of life is to contemplate the good, to grasp the ultimate truth, symbolized by the sun outside the cave. Once you've seen it, you can never go back to ignorance without a part of you dying inside. The cave also hints at something more mystical. It's about levels of consciousness. Shadows on the wall are like dreams within dreams. As you ascend, you move from the world of illusion to the world of clarity. Many traditions echo this structure. In Buddhism, awakening involves moving beyond the illusions of the ego. In Hinduism, the world is Maya, a grand illusion. In Christianity, the light is divine truth. Plato's cave transcends culture and time because it speaks to a universal human experience, the slow, often painful realization that the world is not what it seems. Even today, we are surrounded by shadows. We mistake images for reality. We trust our senses as if they are absolute. But how much of what we believe is simply a reflection of what we've been told? How many of our thoughts are inherited rather than discovered? How many of our truths are secondhand? The cave is not somewhere far away. It is around us. It is within us. Every person lives in some form of cave, and every person, if they choose, can begin the journey out. But Plato knew that not everyone will. The cave is seductive. It's predictable. It offers certainty. The journey out is solitary and unclear. And yet, once you take the first step, you begin to see glimmers of light. Maybe it's a question that won't go away. Maybe it's a moment of doubt that lingers. Maybe it's a book, a conversation, a tragedy, or a strange dream. The journey starts small, but it moves. And the more you look, the more you see. The more you see, the more you realize how little you knew before. And so, Plato leaves us with a choice. Will we stay in the cave, watching shadows, satisfied with illusions? Or will we turn around and climb, even if it hurts? Will we seek truth, even if it costs us comfort, status, or the approval of others? Will we become the prisoner who escapes, or the one who mocks those who try? The allegory of the cave is not just philosophy. It is a mirror. It asks you to reflect on your own mind. It invites you to question everything. Because maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than what's on the wall. Zhuangzi's butterfly dream. There is a story short and simple, yet infinitely deep. It begins with a dream. The ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi once dreamed he was a butterfly. He fluttered through the air, light and carefree, drifting on the wind, untouched by the burdens of human thought. In that dream, he had no awareness of being Zhuangzi. He was only a butterfly, living in the moment, completely absorbed in the joy of being. But then he awoke. And as he opened his eyes, lying once again in his bed, he was filled with uncertainty. Was he Zhuangzi who had dreamed he was a butterfly? Or was he now a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi? This quiet little tale, known as the butterfly dream, has echoed through the centuries, whispering its paradox into the ears of poets, mystics, philosophers, and seekers. It is more than a dream. It is a question, one that doesn't come with a clean, logical answer, one that instead invites you to sit with your own uncertainty. What is real? What is dream? Who are you when you are not thinking about who you are? To the Western mind, the story may seem like a curious puzzle, but to Zhuangzi, it was a doorway into a greater understanding of the world, a world where the boundaries between waking and dreaming, between self and other, between human and nature, are not fixed but fluid. In the Taoist tradition to which Zhuangzi belonged, reality is not a static structure but a flowing process. The butterfly and the man are not two separate beings. They are aspects of the same great movement, different ripples in the same stream. Being and non-being dream and wakefulness, all arise together and fall away together. When you think about the dream deeply, it shakes the foundation of identity. Who are you really? Are you the person who wakes in the morning with a name, a history, a set of beliefs? Or are you the silent awareness behind it all? If a dream can feel just as real while it's happening, what makes waking life any more true? If you can become a butterfly in a dream, then what is the limit of who or what you are? And if the dream feels free, light, joyful, what does that say about the heaviness we carry in our waking lives? Zhuangzi didn't tell this story to confuse. He told it to liberate, to soften the grip we have on fixed identity, to suggest that who we think we are might not be as solid or unchanging as we believe. In the West, identity is often seen as something you must define, your job, your name, your goals. But in the East, especially in Taoism, identity is something to let go of. The goal is not to define yourself, but to dissolve yourself into the larger flow of life, to stop resisting what is and to simply become it. The butterfly dream invites us to loosen our hold on certainty. It shows us that reality is not one-dimensional. There are layers, like veils, like waves folding into each other. You might think you're awake now, listening to this, but how do you know? How many times have you awakened from a dream only to realize you were still dreaming? Even in lucid dreams, where you know you're dreaming, the emotions feel real. The consequences seem real until they vanish. So how do we define reality when everything we experience comes through the filter of perception? Zhuangzi's point is not that reality doesn't exist. Rather, he questions whether we can ever truly know it. And perhaps, more importantly, he asks if we need to. Maybe it is enough to live in harmony with the mystery, rather than trying to pin it down. In Taoism, the goal is not to conquer reality but to dance with it, to move with the rhythms of life, as effortlessly as a butterfly on the breeze. You don't need to explain the wind to be moved by it. You don't need to define the river to float in it. There is something profoundly gentle in Zhuangzi's teaching. It does not force answers. It does not declare ultimate truths. It offers space. Space for uncertainty. Space for paradox. Space to rest in not knowing. And in that space, something strange and beautiful can occur. A shift. A loosening of the ego. A softening of the lines between you and the world. You are no longer a separate thing trying to master life. You are part of it, breathing with it, dreaming it as it dreams you. When we take the butterfly dream seriously, we begin to question more than our sleep. We question our assumptions, our habits, our rigid definitions of success and failure. What if your entire life has been a kind of dream? A dream of identity, of striving, of separation? What if waking up isn't about leaving dreams behind, but about seeing through them while still within them? What if enlightenment is not a light that banishes the dark, but a way of seeing the dance between the two? Zhuangzi is often called the philosopher of freedom, but his freedom is not political or even psychological. It is existential. It is the freedom that comes from not taking things too seriously, not because they don't matter, but because clinging to them causes suffering. In his world, everything changes, everything flows. There is no fixed self, only patterns and transformations. To think you are a fixed thing is to be trapped, but to see yourself as changing, as dreaming, as part of the dance that is to fly. In today's world, we are conditioned to be very sure of ourselves, to know our purpose, to plan everything, to be productive, to have opinions, to be someone. But Zhuangzi whispers to us through time, suggesting that all this effort to define the self might be like chasing a shadow. What if true peace lies not in knowing who you are, but in no longer needing to know? What if letting go of the question is more powerful than answering it? This is not nihilism. It's not about saying nothing matters. It's about seeing the beauty in the temporary, the sacredness of the ever-changing. The butterfly does not worry about its purpose. It simply flies. It is what it is, without resistance. And in that effortless being, there is something sublime, something we forget in our quest to prove and protect ourselves. In the dream, there is no separation, no me in the world, just the experience, just the moment, just the flight. Zhuangzi reminds us that transformation is natural. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly, and neither phase is final. In the same way, your identity is not static. You are always becoming, always shifting. Who you were yesterday is not who you are today. The person you think you are is a story, and like all stories, it can change. Maybe you are not the dreamer or the dreamed. Maybe you are the dreaming itself, the mysterious process by which reality imagines itself anew. So when you lie down at night and drift into sleep, remember Zhuangzi. Remember the butterfly. Let your mind soften. Let your thoughts float. And consider just for a moment that the line between reality and dream might be thinner than you thought. That maybe life is not something to figure out, but something to feel. That maybe the deepest truths don't shout, they whisper, like wings in the night, like a dream you almost remember, like a question that keeps you company. Zhuangzi never tells us the answer to his dream. He leaves it suspended. He doesn't resolve the paradox. He lives in it. And maybe that's the lesson. That some questions are not meant to be solved but savored. That truth is not always a destination, it is a direction, a way of seeing, a way of being. Like the butterfly, we move from one moment to the next, uncertain of the meaning, but alive in the mystery. And so, the next time you ask yourself who you really are, try asking instead, who are you right now in this breath? Who are you when you stop trying to be anything? Who are you when you let yourself float? You may not find a name, but you may find peace. Not the peace of answers, but the peace of openness, the peace of the butterfly, the peace of Zhuangzi's dream. And in that space, perhaps you'll discover something even deeper, that life is not about waking up or dreaming. It is about noticing the beauty of both, Descartes' evil demon and the dream argument. Imagine sitting by a fire, warm and at ease, reflecting on the world. Everything seems real, your hands, your breath, the sound of the crackling flames. But suddenly you ask yourself, how do I know any of this is real? What if I'm dreaming? What if the fire, the room, even my own body are illusions? This was the question that haunted René Descartes, the French philosopher who set out to uncover a foundation of certainty in a world of shifting perceptions. In his search for indubitable truth, he stumbled upon two of the most unsettling ideas in all of philosophy, the dream argument and the terrifying possibility of an evil demon deceiving us at every turn. Descartes began by doubting everything he could possibly doubt. He realized that many things we believe are based on the senses, but the senses can deceive. A stick in water looks bent, but it's not. A distant tower appears round but is square. Our senses can be fooled. And if they deceive us sometimes, how can we ever fully trust them? Even more disturbingly, Descartes asked, how do I know that I'm not dreaming right now? After all, when we dream, we often think we're awake. The dreams feel vivid, detailed, and coherent until we wake up. So what if there is no waking up from this? What if life itself is the dream? This is Descartes' dream argument. It's not that we are always dreaming, but that we can never be absolutely sure we're not. Every sensory experience you have could, in principle, be part of a dream. Your memories, your emotions, the people around you, all could be constructs of the dreaming mind. And if that's possible, then any knowledge based on the senses becomes uncertain. You might believe you're sitting at a desk, listening to this story. But what if the desk, the voice, and even the room are part of a dream so deep, you've mistaken it for truth? But Descartes didn't stop there. The dream argument was just the beginning. He went deeper, into darker territory. He imagined a scenario in which not only are we deceived by dreams, but actively manipulated by a powerful being. A malicious demon, he wrote, of the utmost cunning and power, who devotes himself entirely to deceiving you. This demon could create an illusion so perfect that you would have no way of knowing it was false. Every thought, every sensation, every belief might be a fabrication designed to fool you. Even mathematics, things like 2, 2, 4, could be wrong if the demon willed it. This idea, known as Descartes' evil demon hypothesis, is not meant to suggest such a being exists. Rather, it serves as a mental exercise, a way of pushing doubt to its absolute limit. If it's even possible that such a demon exists, then we cannot be certain of anything, not even the most basic truths. It is a philosophical apocalypse, the destruction of all certainty. And yet, for Descartes, it was necessary, because only by imagining the total collapse of knowledge could he begin to rebuild it, brick by brick, on a more solid foundation. The fear in this scenario is profound. If all our experiences could be manufactured by an external manipulator, then we are not autonomous beings. We are puppets. We are minds trapped in illusions, fed falsehoods, unable to distinguish truth from lies. It forces us to ask, what is real? What can be trusted? And perhaps more disturbingly, who are we if everything we know has been given to us by something that wants to keep us in the dark? But in the darkness of doubt, Descartes found a single, unshakable truth. Even if a demon is deceiving me, I must exist, if only as a thinking thing. I can doubt everything, my body, the world, even logic itself, but I cannot doubt that I am doubting. And if I doubt, I must be. This gave rise to his famous statement, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. It is the one certainty that survives even the most extreme doubt. The very act of questioning proves the existence of the questioner. This discovery becomes Descartes' foundation. From this one truth, he begins to rebuild his understanding of the world, but the shadow of the demon never fully vanishes. Even today, the evil demon serves as a metaphor for radical skepticism. In a world increasingly shaped by digital illusions, artificial intelligence, and deepfakes, the idea of being deceived by an unseen manipulator feels less like a fantasy and more like a warning. Could algorithms play the role of the demon? Could social media feed us a version of reality that is carefully curated, distorted, or even false? The modern demon may not wear horns, it may wear a code. Descartes' nightmare also paved the way for future thought experiments. In the 20th century, philosopher Hilary Putnam proposed the brain in a vat scenario. What if your brain has been removed from your body and placed in a tank of nutrients, hooked up to a supercomputer that sends it the same electrical signals it would receive if it were in a body? The brain would have no way to know. It would still see, hear, touch, and feel, just as you are now. Everything would seem real, but it would be a simulation. The body, the world, the people, none of them would exist. It would be a perfect illusion, just like the demon's design. And then there is the simulation hypothesis, popularized in recent years. It suggests that we might be living in a computer simulation created by an advanced civilization. If such a simulation is possible, and statistically likely, then how do we know we are not already in it? This modern twist echoes Descartes' questions in a new language. The demon becomes the programmer. The dream becomes the simulation. The illusion remains the same. But Descartes didn't sink into despair. His project was not to abandon knowledge, but to purify it. By stripping away everything that could be doubted, he hoped to arrive at something that couldn't. And in doing so, he reshaped the course of philosophy. His method of doubt became the precursor to the scientific method, a way of questioning assumptions, testing beliefs, and seeking only what can be proven. His work reminds us that truth is not something to be accepted blindly. It is something to be earned through careful inquiry and relentless honesty. And yet, there is something haunting in the way his questions linger. When you look at the world around you, how much of it do you take for granted? How often do you stop and ask whether your beliefs are truly yours or inherited from culture, habit, or manipulation? How often do you reflect on the possibility that what you see is not what is, but what your mind wants or needs to see? Descartes invites us to live a more examined life, one that does not rest on easy answers, one that dares to question the ground beneath our feet. The evil demon is not just a scary idea, it is a mirror. It forces us to confront our dependence on certainty, our desire to be right, our tendency to trust our senses, and our reason without challenge. But it also reveals our resilience, because even in the face of ultimate deception, Descartes found a foothold. He found the thinking self, and from that tiny island of certainty, he began again. So what do we do with this today? Maybe we won't defeat the demon, or escape the dream, or unplug from the matrix, but we can awaken in another way. We can become more conscious of how we know what we know. We can develop humility in our beliefs. We can ask deeper questions. We can practice skepticism, not to become cynical, but to become clear. Descartes didn't give us all the answers, he gave us a method, a way to peel back the layers of illusion and search, patiently, for truth. And in that search, perhaps we find something even greater than knowledge. Perhaps we find courage. The courage to say, I do not know. The courage to doubt. The courage to think for ourselves. The courage to awaken, even if we're not sure what we'll find. Descartes teaches us that even in a world filled with uncertainty, there is still value in the pursuit, that thinking itself is proof of existence, that the mind, even when shaken by doubt, is still a beacon. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, ask yourself gently, how do I know this is not a dream? Feel the bed beneath you. Hear the sounds around you. And realize that, just like Descartes, you may never know for sure. But you are thinking. And in thinking you are. And in being you are part of a deeper mystery, one that no demon, no dream, no illusion can ever fully take away. Because even in the deepest doubt, there is a spark of awareness that cannot be extinguished. And that spark is you, the brain in a vat. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world around you. The weight of your body on the chair, the sound of this voice, the faint presence of your breath moving in and out. Everything feels real. Everything seems grounded. But what if none of it truly exists? What if your body isn't here at all? What if, in some dark laboratory, your brain is floating in a vat of fluid, suspended, pulsing, and wired to a machine that perfectly simulates every experience you've ever had? Would you know? Could you tell the difference? This is the essence of the brain in a vat thought experiment, one of the most disquieting philosophical ideas to emerge from modern reflections on reality, perception, and consciousness. It's a scenario designed not to frighten but to illuminate, to push us past what feels comfortable, to ask the question most of us never ask: how do you know that what you call reality is actually real? The thought experiment is simple, but its implications are deep. Imagine that your brain has been surgically removed from your body and placed in a transparent vat. Electrodes are connected to your brain, feeding it with electrical impulses identical to those it would receive if it were still housed in your skull. These impulses are generated by a powerful computer. This computer has been programmed to create the illusion of a full, rich world: sights, sounds, textures, emotions. You still believe you are walking, talking, touching, seeing, but you are not. You are a brain in a vat, dreaming of a world that never was. You eat, but your stomach is gone. You hold someone's hand, but there's no hand to hold. You see a sunset, but there's no sky, no sun, no earth. And yet, every sensation feels just as vivid, just as convincing, as if the world were truly there. This is the terrifying elegance of the idea. It mimics reality so closely that you can't tell it apart. It calls into question not just what you know, but how you know. This scenario is not just science fiction. It's a serious philosophical challenge. It was popularized in the 20th century by philosophers like Hilary Putnam as a modern response to older skeptical arguments, like Descartes' evil demon. While Descartes imagined a malicious being deceiving your mind, the brain in a vat is a mechanical, clinical version. There's no need for a demon, only a computer. In today's world, where virtual reality becomes more immersive by the day, and artificial intelligence simulates speech and emotion, the brain in a vat feels disturbingly plausible. And the question it asks is simple: if all your experiences could be simulated, how can you prove that they're not? What evidence could you offer that you're not currently a brain in a vat? If every piece of evidence you provide is itself part of the illusion, then the illusion is airtight. You're trapped inside a world that seems coherent, but is ultimately a lie. Let's take it deeper. Suppose you say, I know I'm not a brain in a vat because I can see my hands, I can walk through my house, I can talk to people. But each of those experiences could be simulated by the computer. You might feel resistance when you touch a wall, but that could be a carefully timed signal. You might see colors, but colors are just patterns of light interpreted by your brain. And in the vat, the brain interprets whatever the machine tells it to. So no matter what you perceive, it could still be part of the simulation. This raises a chilling possibility. If we cannot distinguish the simulation from reality, then what is the difference? If experience is all we have, and that experience can be faked, then reality becomes a fragile, shifting concept. You may believe you live in a world filled with people and objects and places, but at the deepest level, you're only interacting with your own mind's interpretation of data. The world could vanish, and you'd never know. It could have never existed, and you would still believe it did. Yet, there's something strangely liberating in this idea, because it forces us to look inward, to stop assuming that what we see and hear is all there is, to realize that consciousness, our ability to reflect, to feel, to be, is not tied to a location or a body. In the brain, in a vat scenario, even when the world disappears, the awareness remains. And maybe that awareness is what matters most. Philosophers have long debated whether this scenario can be refuted. Hilary Putnam argued that it's self-defeating. If you were truly a brain in a vat, you wouldn't have the concept of a vat or a brain, because those concepts were formed inside the illusion. So when you say, I might be a brain in a vat, you're already assuming a reality that contradicts the illusion itself. It's like dreaming of the word dream before ever waking up. But others are not so convinced. They say the possibility cannot be ruled out. It remains a shadow at the edge of our thinking, a whisper that says you might be wrong about everything. The implications don't stop at the individual level. If everyone is a brain in a vat, then there is no shared world, no objective reality, only overlapping illusions. Communication becomes a dance of minds, each confined to their own simulation. Society, history, even science become part of the dream. Truth, then, is not what corresponds to an outside world, but what feels consistent inside the dream. This shifts truth from objectivity to coherence, and coherence can be programmed. The brain in a vat also intersects with the simulation hypothesis, made famous by thinkers like Nick Bostrom and popularized in films like The Matrix. The idea that we might be living in a computer-generated simulation created by an advanced civilization is eerily close to the vat scenario. But the twist is that in the simulation hypothesis, we might still have bodies, just digital ones. Our experiences are still programmed, our world still artificial, but we're not brains and fluid, we're data in a vast machine. Still, the philosophical question remains the same. If it feels real, and there's no way to prove otherwise, what does reality even mean? And yet, even in the most convincing illusions, something breaks through. A moment of silence, a breath, a question. Is this real? That moment is awareness waking up, the awareness that wonders, that doubts, that watches itself thinking, that inner spark, that silent observer. It cannot be programmed. It cannot be simulated. It is not part of the illusion. It is the one thing that sees the illusion for what it is. And maybe, in the end, that awareness is the only reality that matters. So where does this leave us? Should we panic, spiral into nihilism, or give up on knowing anything at all? Zhuangzi would say to let the butterfly dream. Descartes would say to hold on to the cogito. I think, therefore I am. And perhaps the brain in a vat teaches us something deeper. That certainty is not the goal. Presence is. That we don't need to know whether the world is real to appreciate it, to feel joy, to love, to breathe, to be kind. Whether it's an illusion or not, your experience is yours. And in that experience, you can find meaning. You may be a brain in a vat, or you may be a soul in a body, or a mind in a dream. But the feeling of listening, of wondering, of being present in this moment, none of that is false. It is happening now. And that now is the doorway into the real, whatever it may be. So let the question remain. Let it float beside you. Let it stir your curiosity. But don't let it take you away from the only thing you ever truly have, this moment, this breath, this awareness. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only reality that was ever real. The simulation hypothesis. Imagine for a moment that everything you know, your body, your memories, your home, the people you love, even the stars above, is not real in the way you think. Imagine that it is all part of a simulation, not a metaphor, not a dream, but a meticulously programmed virtual reality, so immersive, so flawless, that you've mistaken it for the real world. This is not science fiction. It's a serious philosophical idea. A theory that says the universe itself might be an elaborate simulation, created by a far more advanced intelligence than ours. This is the simulation hypothesis. The idea first gained wide attention when philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper in 2003 proposing a bold trilemma. He argued that one of three things must be true. Either civilizations like ours never reach a level of technology capable of creating such simulations, or they do reach that level but choose not to run simulations of conscious beings, or we are almost certainly living in a simulation right now. That third possibility is the most unsettling. It suggests that our entire reality might be nothing more than data running on a cosmic supercomputer. Every tree, every sound, every breeze, just part of the code. The logic behind this idea is disarmingly simple. If it's possible to simulate consciousness with enough detail, down to the neurons, the senses, the memories, then simulated minds would vastly outnumber organic ones. If just one advanced civilization chose to run such simulations, it could create trillions of conscious beings. And if that's the case, then statistically, it is more likely that you are one of the simulations than one of the rare original beings living outside the system. It's a numbers game, and the numbers do not favor reality being base reality. But this theory goes deeper than statistics. It challenges our understanding of what it means to be real. We trust our senses to tell us the truth about the world. We believe what we see, what we touch, what we hear. But in a simulation, those senses can be mimicked. Your sight, your hearing, even your thoughts could all be artificially generated. If you've ever had a dream that felt real, even for a moment, you've already experienced the beginnings of this possibility. Now imagine a dream you never wake from. A dream that follows consistent laws of physics, that ages with you, that never breaks its illusion. Some people compare it to a game, like The Sims or virtual reality. But this isn't just a game you can take off. It's total. Comprehensive. You were born into it. You never saw the interface. You don't remember logging in. And if this is true, then the world you see is not what it seems. The mountains are polygons. The oceans are algorithms. The past is just stored data. And time itself may be nothing more than a function ticking forward at the pace of a processor's rhythm. The simulation hypothesis also sheds strange light on the mysteries of our universe. Why is the universe governed by mathematical laws? Why is it so perfectly fine-tuned for life? Why does it seem that everything operates like a giant computer program, with particles behaving predictably, as if following lines of code? The idea that we're in a simulation would explain these puzzles in a single stroke. Of course it's all math, because it's all code. Of course it's fine-tuned, because someone designed it that way. Even quantum mechanics, with its bizarre indeterminacy and observer effects, begins to make sense under this view. In many interpretations of quantum physics, particles exist in a cloud of probability until observed, much like a computer only renders a tree in a game when the player looks in that direction. Why waste processing power on what isn't being watched? The simulation hypothesis fits neatly into these oddities. It offers a story where strangeness is not confusion, but intention. But then, we are left with deeper questions. If this is a simulation, who made it? Who or what built this world and placed us inside it? Are they gods, aliens, our future selves? Are we entertainment? A science experiment? A history project? Or just an accident, a byproduct of someone else's quest for something completely unrelated? The possibilities stretch the imagination. Some have likened the simulators to deities, not because they are divine, but because their power over our reality is total. They could change the rules, end the program, or rewind our memories, and we would never know. Others suggest we are living in a simulation built by our own descendants. That in the far future, humanity developed such advanced technology that simulating their own past became trivial. Perhaps they wanted to understand history. Perhaps they wanted to experience life before everything changed. And we, right now, are part of that simulated history, just lines of code, just echoes of their curiosity. But then, what of meaning? If we're simulated, does anything matter? This question leads many to despair, but perhaps it shouldn't. Because if we are conscious, if we can feel joy and pain, love and sorrow, then our experiences are still real to us. Simulation or not, the richness of life remains. Your sadness is still sadness. Your laughter is still laughter. You are here now, wondering, thinking. That cannot be simulated away. In fact, it may be the only thing that proves you're more than code. And maybe, in some strange way, this theory restores a kind of magic to the world. If we are inside a simulation, then this world was designed, crafted, chosen, given rules and form. That doesn't make it less meaningful. It might make it more so. Perhaps beauty isn't an accident, it's part of the architecture. Perhaps suffering isn't meaningless, it's part of the test. Or perhaps none of it is planned, and the simulation is just a mirror, one that reflects not what's real, but what we believe to be real. The simulation hypothesis also asks us to reflect on our own creations. We are already building simulated realities, games, digital worlds, artificial intelligences. As technology advances, we may soon create simulations indistinguishable from reality. And when we do, we'll have to ask, are the beings inside those worlds conscious? Do they dream? Do they suffer? And if they do, what responsibilities do we have toward them? The more we create worlds, the more we begin to understand what it means to live in one. And yet, no matter how convincing the hypothesis, there's no test to prove or disprove it. If the simulation is perfect, then any test you run is part of the program. Any contradiction can be patched. Any flaw can be covered. That is the paradox. If it's true, we may never know. If it's false, we may never prove it. We are like fish trying to understand the water they swim in, trapped inside the system, looking for a way out. But maybe the answer isn't out there. Maybe it's in here. Because the real power of the simulation hypothesis isn't in whether it's true or false. It's in how it changes the way we think. It invites us to question assumptions, to look closer, to ask deeper questions, to be aware of the frame, not just the painting. It reminds us that reality is not a fixed thing. It is filtered, interpreted, constructed. Whether we live in a base reality or a simulated one, our minds are always mediating what we see. In that sense, we are already living in a kind of simulation, one shaped by memory, language, emotion, and belief. So what does it mean to awaken? If the simulation cannot be broken, can it still be seen? Maybe awareness is the first step. Awareness that what we call real is not simple, that our world may be deeper, stranger, more malleable than we thought. And in that awareness, there is freedom. Not freedom from the simulation, but freedom inside it. The freedom to choose how we respond. The freedom to love, to create, to reflect. To treat others not as code, but as conscious beings walking the same uncertain path. Perhaps the point of the simulation hypothesis is not to find the exit, but to realize there may not be one. And in that realization, to live more fully. To treat life as precious, not because it's real, but because it feels real. Because it matters to you. Because it's all you have. Whether you are biological or digital, carbon or code, the experience of being alive is sacred. And if the simulation is trying to teach you anything, maybe it's this: awaken to the moment. Honor the mystery. Cherish the dream. Because whether or not it's a simulation, this life is still yours to live. Zeno's paradoxes of motion. Close your eyes and picture a runner on a smooth, empty track. He leans forward, muscles coiled, feet pressed against the earth. At the sound of a signal, he takes off, fluid, focused, fast. But as he moves, something strange happens. His legs push forward, yet he never arrives. For every distance he crosses, there is another half to go, and then another, and another still. However fast he runs, he can never quite finish the journey. This is not a glitch in reality. It is the heart of a paradox, a quiet puzzle whispered through time by a man named Zeno of Elea, who dared to ask if motion itself might be an illusion. Zeno lived over 2,000 years ago, a student of the philosopher Parmenides. While Parmenides argued that all change is an illusion, that the universe is unchanging and indivisible, Zeno offered a set of paradoxes to defend this radical idea. His goal was not to confuse, but to challenge the very logic of movement and change. The most famous of his arguments are called Zeno's paradoxes of motion, and they still disturb and inspire thinkers today, because deep within these paradoxes lies a riddle about space, time, infinity, and our most basic understanding of how the world works. The first paradox is known as the dichotomy. Suppose you want to walk across a room. Before you can get to the end, you must first get halfway. And before you can get halfway, you must get a quarter of the way. And before that, an eighth. The path is divided infinitely. There is always another half to reach before you reach the whole. So how can motion even begin? If there are infinite steps to take, how can you take the first one? How do you cross a room if you must first complete an endless series of tasks? In mathematics, we understand now that infinite sums can converge to a finite distance, but the psychological weight of the paradox remains. Infinity hides inside every simple action, and that is unsettling. Zeno's second paradox is known as Achilles and the tortoise. In this story, the swift-footed Achilles gives a tortoise a small head start in a race. Logically, we know Achilles is faster and should easily overtake the tortoise. But Zeno challenges this intuition. He says that by the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise started, the tortoise has moved ahead. By the time Achilles reaches that new point, the tortoise has moved again. Every time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise is still ahead, if only slightly. And so, Zeno concludes Achilles can never overtake the tortoise. No matter how fast he runs, he is always playing catch-up in an infinite sequence of steps. At first, it sounds absurd. We've all seen faster runners overtake slower ones. But Zeno isn't denying speed, he's exposing the tension between infinite divisibility and actual motion. He breaks time and space into endless fragments, then asks if movement can survive being sliced into infinity. And that question doesn't go away. Even with modern calculus, which resolves the paradox mathematically, the philosophical unease lingers. If space and time are continuous, how can we ever truly reach a destination? If each moment is infinitely divisible, what does it mean to arrive? Another paradox. The arrow takes aim at time itself. Zeno asks you to imagine an arrow flying through the air. At any single instant, the arrow is not moving. It is frozen, occupying one fixed position in space. And if time is composed entirely of such instants, frozen, motionless points, then the arrow never actually moves. It is always still, at every moment. So how does motion arise? If all of time is made of unmoving slices, how do those slices produce movement? The paradox suggests that motion is not found in time itself, but in the illusion of continuity, a series of still frames pretending to flow. This idea is eerily familiar today. Think of a film reel. Each frame is still, but when played in rapid succession, it gives the illusion of motion. Is that what life is? A series of static instants flickering so fast that we believe in movement. If so, then motion is not a thing in itself. It is a trick of perception, stitched together by the mind. Zeno invites us to question the basic elements of experience. What is a moment? What is space? What is time? And are these things what they seem, or just shadows on the wall? Zeno's final paradox, known as the stadium, imagines 3 rows of objects moving past each other in opposite directions. The puzzle explores the relativity of motion, suggesting contradictions in how we perceive time intervals when motion is viewed from different perspectives. Though more technical, the stadium paradox hints at deeper truths, later echoed in Einstein's theory of relativity, that motion is not absolute, that speed, distance, and even time itself may depend on the observer. Zeno, in his quiet way, touched the edges of ideas that would not be fully explored until millennia later. But why did Zeno do this? What was he trying to say? On the surface, he seems to be arguing that motion is impossible, but perhaps that's not quite right. Perhaps he is telling us that motion, as we understand it, is incomplete, that our models of the world, based on linear time and measurable space, are simplifications, that reality might not be as smooth or predictable as we imagine. He wanted us to stop taking things for granted, to realize that even walking across a room involves a leap into the infinite. Modern physics has responded in many ways. With the advent of calculus, developed by Newton and Leibniz, we learned how to sum infinite series. Achilles does catch the tortoise, because though the steps are infinite, their total length is finite. The runner does reach the finish line. The infinite steps take a finite time. The paradox dissolves under the math, but the wonder remains. The idea that infinity is folded into the most ordinary actions, that's something no equation can fully erase. It changes the way we see the world. In quantum mechanics, we've discovered that at very small scales, space and time may not be infinitely divisible after all. There might be a smallest possible unit, a Planck length, a Planck time. If true, then Zeno's infinite divisions would hit a hard limit. Reality would be pixelated, not smooth. A digital cosmos, not an analog one. This doesn't solve Zeno's paradox, but it reframes it. Maybe motion survives because reality is not truly infinite, but quantized, built from tiny, indivisible pieces like a mosaic. And yet Zeno's paradoxes continue to haunt us, not because they are unsolved, but because they reveal something deeper, that beneath the familiar surface of motion, there is mystery. We move through space and time as if we understand them. But do we? When you walk across a room, are you crossing a continuous stretch of space, or leaping across an infinite cascade of vanishing points? When you experience a moment, are you living in flowing time, or passing through a series of stillnesses that only feel like movement? Zeno teaches us to pause, to see the strangeness hidden in the ordinary, to realize that even the simple act of lifting a hand contains an infinity of questions. And perhaps this is his greatest gift, not in proving that motion is impossible, but in showing that our understanding of motion and time and space is far from complete. That philosophy begins not with answers, but with wonder. So the next time you walk across a room, take a breath, feel the floor beneath you, notice the rhythm of your steps, and remember that you are moving through paradox, through questions that go all the way down. Zeno walks beside you, silent, pointing not at the finish line, but at the space between each step, the space where reality hides, the space where mystery begins. And perhaps, in that pause between movement and stillness, you'll feel the paradox for yourself. Maya, illusion in Vedanta. Close your eyes. Let the world fade for a moment. The sound of your thoughts, the presence of your breath, the feeling of being. Now ask yourself, what is this? What is this experience? This body, this life, this world filled with form and sound and color. What if all of it were not the ultimate truth, but a beautiful veil? A dream? A shimmering play of appearances? In the ancient wisdom of Vedanta, this veil has a name. It is called Maya, the illusion, the cosmic enchantment, the spell that convinces us the temporary is real and the eternal is hidden. In Sanskrit, Maya comes from the root word maya, meaning to measure, to form, or to build. Maya is not simply falsehood. It is more subtle than that. It is the power through which the one appears as many, through which the formless appears as form. Maya is the divine mask that Brahman, the ultimate, infinite reality, wears to play the game of existence. And just like in a dream, we are caught inside its patterns, believing in separation, duality, and the story of the self. But like all dreams, it dissolves the moment we awaken. Vedanta tells us that Brahman alone is real, not real as in physical or tangible, but real as in unchanging, eternal, beyond time and space. Everything else, the world of names and forms, of beginnings and endings, is not false, but not ultimately real. It is relatively real. It exists the way a mirage exists. You see it, you feel it, you're moved by it. But when you reach for it, it slips away. Maya is that mirage. It makes the infinite appear finite, the unchanging appear fleeting, the boundless appear as a body. This illusion is not evil. It is not a trick played with malice. In Vedanta, Maya is divine. It is sacred play, Lila, the dance of Shiva, the play of Krishna, the unfolding of creation not as punishment, but as art. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, the world is not separate from Brahman. But we forget. We see the wave and not the sea. We see the mask and not the face behind it. And in this forgetting, the illusion becomes real to us. Think of a rope lying on the ground. In the dim light, it looks like a snake. You jump back. Your heart races. You fear it. But when the light shines, you see clearly it was a rope all along. The fear was real, the reaction was real, but the snake never existed. Maya is like that. It overlays something onto what is and makes us believe it. We react, we suffer, we strive. But the cause of our suffering was never real. It was a projection born from misperception. The self, too, is caught in Maya. We believe we are this body, this mind, this history. But in Vedanta, the true self is Atman, pure consciousness, unborn and undying. When consciousness identifies with the body, it says, I am this. It becomes entangled in the story of pleasure and pain, gain and loss. But Atman is none of these. It is the witness, the silent observer behind every thought and sensation. Maya makes the mirror foggy. It makes the eternal seem distant when in truth, it is closer than breath. But Maya is not just illusion, it is also power. In the Advaita Vedanta tradition, it is said that Maya has two forces: Avarnana, the power of concealment, and Viksipa, the power of projection. First, it hides the real. Then, it projects the unreal. Like a magician hiding the coin and showing you a dove, Maya conceals Brahman and shows you the world. The result is a life of chasing, of clinging, of confusion. We chase shadows thinking they are solid. We grasp at reflections, hoping to be fulfilled. And yet, Vedanta says, this illusion can be pierced. Like waking from a dream, the spell of Maya can be broken, not through belief, but through realization. Not through effort, but through clarity. The path is called Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. It begins with inquiry. Who am I? not as a question of personality but of essence. The seeker peels away every layer, body, senses, thoughts, ego, until nothing is left but pure awareness. In that silence, Brahman is revealed, and with it, the illusion fades. When the sage awakens, they do not see a different world. They see the same world, but differently. They see through it. They walk in the dream, but know it is a dream. They play the roles of life, but never forget who they are. The difference is not in what appears, but in how it is seen. The mind no longer clings. The heart no longer fears. The self no longer separates. This is moksha, liberation from illusion, freedom from the binding grip of Maya. But most of us are still dreaming. We measure our lives in successes and failures. We judge ourselves by our appearance, our possessions, our achievements. We compare. We desire. We fear loss. And every time we do, we reinforce the illusion. We believe the shadows are real. We forget the light that casts them. Maya is not just outside, it is in every moment we forget our true nature. It lives in the unquestioned thought, the automatic reaction, the belief that we are incomplete. And yet Maya is also the doorway to truth. For if illusion exists, so must that which it hides. The shadow proves the presence of light. The dream hints at the dreamer. In the flickering of the world, we can glimpse the stillness beyond it. The heart longs for something permanent, something true. That longing is the whisper of Brahman, calling us home, calling us to wake up, not by rejecting the world, but by seeing through it, by remembering what was never lost. Modern science, too, now echoes some of these ancient ideas. Quantum physics reveals a world that is not as solid as it seems. Particles are waves. Matter dissolves into energy. Space and time bend and shift. Reality, at its core, is strange, uncertain, and deeply interconnected. And some ask, what if it is all information? What if consciousness is not in the world, but the world is in consciousness? These echoes are faint, but they remind us that the boundary between science and spirituality is not as firm as we thought. Maya, then, is not an enemy. It is a teacher, a mirror, a path. It is the canvas on which life is painted, and though it hides the eternal, it also points to it. Every disappointment, every joy, every heartbreak, every wonder, they are all invitations to look deeper, to ask, what is this? Who am I? What lies behind this ever-changing screen? Maya says, look here. Vedanta replies, look beyond. In the end, Maya is the divine illusion, a play of consciousness pretending to be a world, a drama with many actors, many stories, but one silent witness. You are not the character. You are the light behind the stage. You are not lost in the world. The world is rising in you. And when you remember this, even briefly, the spell begins to lift. The dream begins to soften, and something vast, quiet, and timeless begins to awaken. Because beyond Maya, there is Brahman. Beyond the mask, there is the face. Beyond the play, there is the presence. And that presence is you. Schrodinger's cat. Imagine a box. It sits on a quiet table in a still room. You cannot see inside. You cannot touch or hear what lies within. All you know is that something lives there. Or perhaps it doesn't. A cat, they say. Neither asleep nor awake. Neither dead nor alive. Until the box is opened, its fate remains suspended, uncertain, unknowable. Welcome to the strange, unsettling world of quantum mechanics. This is the riddle known as Schrodinger's cat. The thought experiment was proposed by Erwin Schrödinger in 1935, not to explain quantum physics, but to challenge it, to show how absurd it becomes when applied to everyday objects. Inside the sealed box, the scenario goes as a cat, a vial of poison, a radioactive atom, and a Geiger counter. If the atom decays, the detector is triggered, the vial breaks, and the poison is released. If the atom does not decay, the vial remains intact. Quantum mechanics tells us that, until observed, the atom exists in a superposition, both decayed and not decayed. Therefore, so does the cat. It is both alive and dead simultaneously. This is not a trick of language. It is the core of quantum theory. In the world of the very small, atoms, electrons, particles, objects do not exist in definite states. They exist in possibilities. They are not here or there, but in a cloud of potential, a haze of maybes. They are not this or that, but both. Only when measured, when observed, does the wave of possibilities collapse into a single reality. Schrödinger's cat was meant to expose the tension between the quantum and the classical worlds, because surely a cat cannot be both dead and alive, and yet the theory says it must be. The cat is not the subject of the experiment. The cat is the mirror that shows us how strange our universe becomes when we look closely enough. In our everyday lives, things seem certain. A light is on or off, a door is open or closed, but quantum mechanics reveals that, at the deepest level, reality is not binary. It is smeared across probabilities. It flows like a river of uncertainty, and until we observe it, we do not know which path it will take, or perhaps, more disturbingly, it has taken all paths. This superposition challenges everything we think we know about truth. We are used to fact, to outcomes. But in the quantum world, truth is conditional. It depends on observation. Until the box is opened, the cat is not just unknown, it is undefined. The very act of looking does not just reveal reality, it creates it. This is the mystery of the observer effect. That consciousness itself may influence the unfolding of the universe. That reality waits, suspended in silence, until it is seen. And so, Schrödinger's cat becomes more than a paradox. It becomes a symbol of the relationship between mind and matter, between subject and object. It whispers a question: if reality is undefined until observed, then who are we, the observers? Are we separate from the world, or entangled with it? Do we witness the universe, or do we participate in its creation? The boundary between self and cosmos begins to blur. The box is not just outside, it is within. For decades, scientists have tried to resolve the paradox. Some interpretations say the wave function collapses the moment information exists. Others suggest the cat is always one or the other. We just don't know which. Still others propose the many worlds interpretation, in which all possible outcomes happen, but in separate, parallel universes. In one world, the cat lives. In another, it dies. Each outcome splits the universe. Each choice becomes a branching path. And somewhere, perhaps, there are infinite versions of you, each living a different reality. It sounds fantastical, but this is quantum theory, not myth, not magic. It is the most tested and precise framework in all of science. And yet, no one agrees on what it means. Its equations predict outcomes with astonishing accuracy, but its implications defy reason. Schrödinger's cat, then, is not an answer. It is an invitation to step beyond certainty, to live in a world where paradox is not the enemy of truth, but its companion. The cat also speaks to our human experience. How often do we live with uncertainty? How many of our moments are suspended in not knowing, waiting for an answer, waiting for the box to open, between diagnosis and result, between decision and consequence, between goodbye and what comes next? Schrödinger's cat is not just in the lab, it is in our hearts. In every place where outcomes are unknown, in every breath where the future remains unformed. And yet, the paradox teaches us patience, that some things are not meant to be resolved immediately. That ambiguity is not always to be feared, that in the space between possibilities there is room to wonder, room to imagine, room to grow. Perhaps the cat reminds us to sit with uncertainty, not rush to escape it, because in that stillness, we learn something deeper, not about physics, but about presence. For philosophers, the cat is a doorway to larger questions. Is the world fundamentally real, or is it a projection of consciousness? If observation defines outcome, then who is observing the observer? Does consciousness arise from matter, or does matter arise in consciousness? These questions ripple through Eastern and Western traditions alike. In Vedanta, the world is Maya, illusion, real in appearance, but not in essence. In Buddhism, reality is interdependent, without fixed essence. In quantum physics, the observer and the observed are bound in a dance neither fully leads. So, is the cat alive or dead? The answer is yes, and no, and maybe, and everything in between. Until the box is opened, all possibilities remain. But perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Perhaps the point is not to open the box, but to recognize the box itself. The box of assumptions, the box of either or thinking, the box of linear time, fixed identity, and separate self. Maybe the cat teaches us not to look for final answers, but to see the mystery with new eyes. In our lives, we are all Schrödinger's cat at times. We live between jobs, between identities, between endings and beginnings. We carry both hope and fear. We are both becoming and unraveling. And that is okay, because within uncertainty lies creativity. Within paradox lies transformation. The cat is not a curse. It is a catalyst, a call to embrace the unknown with courage. So the next time you feel lost, suspended in a state you cannot define, remember the cat. Remember that uncertainty is not a failure of knowledge. It is the edge of becoming, the place where truth is still unfolding, the place where possibility still breathes. Life, after all, is not a closed box. It is an open question. And in that question, you are both the cat and the observer, both the dreamer and the dream, both the mystery and the light that sees it. Winger's friend. Imagine a laboratory, quiet, sealed. Inside is a physicist, a friend. She stands over an apparatus, preparing to make a delicate quantum measurement. Outside the lab, you wait, watching the clock, waiting to hear her result. But time, in quantum mechanics, does not move the way it seems. And what your friend observes may not be the same as what you believe to be true. This is the story known as Winger's friend, a haunting thought experiment that questions not only what reality is, but whether it exists at all, outside the mind of the observer. The paradox was proposed by Eugene Winger, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, in 1961. He was building on the strange puzzle of Schrödinger's cat, but taking it one step further. Instead of a cat, Winger imagined a human observer inside the box, a friend. And instead of just asking whether the cat is alive or dead before observation, he asked something more disturbing: what happens when different observers experience different realities? Can two truths exist at the same time? Can both be right, even when they contradict? Here's how it unfolds. Winger's friend is inside the lab. She performs a quantum experiment, let's say, measuring the spin of an electron. According to quantum theory, before measurement, the electron is in a superposition of states. It has no definite spin. Only when observed does it collapse into a definite value, spin up or spin down. For the friend inside the lab, this collapse happens when she looks at the detector. She records a result. To her, the wave function has ended. The story has settled into reality. But for Winger, standing outside the lab with no access to the result, the entire lab, including his friend and her knowledge, is still in superposition. He describes the entire closed system as a single quantum state, unmeasured and unresolved. From his perspective, she has not seen a definite result. She exists in a blend of possibilities, one where she saw spin up and one where she saw spin down. To Winger, her consciousness is entangled with the particle she observed. From his view, the collapse has not yet occurred. And here's the twist. Both perspectives are correct within quantum theory. The friend has experienced a reality where the wave function collapsed. Winger sees her as part of a system where it hasn't. Two observers, two truths, one universe, or perhaps more than one. This is the heart of the Winger's friend paradox. It suggests that reality is not absolute, that it may be observer-dependent, that what is real for one conscious being may not be real for another. And if that is true, then what is truth? What is reality? Is there such a thing as a single shared world? Or are we all living inside bubbles of observation, stitching together meaning from incomplete glimpses? The implications are dizzying. If two observers can disagree about what is real without either being wrong, then objectivity dissolves. Science, which depends on shared, repeatable outcomes, begins to unravel. Facts become fragile. Measurement becomes personal. And reality becomes something far stranger than we imagined. Winger himself was deeply troubled by this. He believed consciousness must play a central role in collapsing the wave function, that it is not the measuring device, nor the physical interaction, but the mind of the observer that brings potential into actuality. That conscious awareness is what transforms possibility into presence. But this raises further questions. What is consciousness? Is it inside the brain? Outside of space-time? Can it be entangled with reality itself? In recent decades, experiments inspired by Winger's thought experiment have only deepened the mystery. In 2019, a team of physicists in Vienna performed a version of the Winger's friend scenario using entangled photons. The results seem to confirm that different observers can, in principle, record conflicting events, both of which are valid within quantum mechanics. In other words, the universe may allow multiple observer-specific realities. Your truth may not be mine, and neither one is wrong. This is not science fiction. It is experimental quantum physics, and it is forcing us to rethink the most basic assumptions we hold about the world. We like to believe in a single timeline, a single history, a single set of facts. But the quantum world does not seem to care about consistency. It does not offer comfort. It offers paradox. Wigner's friend also speaks to the deeply personal nature of perception. Each of us is our own observer, locked inside the laboratory of our own mind. We experience the world through the filter of memory, emotion, culture, and attention. What we observe becomes our reality. But just beyond the walls of our mind, someone else is observing something else, seeing a different version of the same world. Who is right? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. The thought experiment also raises the question, what role does communication play in collapsing reality? If Wigner's friend never tells him her result, does her reality remain suspended? Do shared truths only crystallize when stories are told? Is language the bridge between possible worlds? The moment we speak, we lock in the version we choose. Until then, the narrative drifts like quantum fog, waiting for form. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics attempt to resolve the paradox. The many worlds interpretation says that both outcomes happen, one in each branch of a continually splitting multiverse. There's a universe where the friend saw spin up, and another where she saw spin down. No collapse, just divergence. This view avoids contradiction, but at the cost of spawning infinite parallel realities at every quantum decision point. Other approaches, like quantum Bayesianism or relational quantum mechanics, argue that facts only exist relative to observers, that there is no universal reality, only contextual truth. Wigner's friend, in this light, is not a bug but a feature. The universe does not contain facts. It contains relationships between minds and measurements, and those relationships are all we can ever know. But maybe, beyond the theory, Wigner's friend is also a metaphor, a quiet teaching, a reminder that we are not separate from the world we observe, that our minds do not float above reality, they are woven into it, that knowing is not passive, it is creative, and that behind every measurement is a mystery, behind every fact a fog, behind every story a silence that has yet to be spoken. We often imagine ourselves as detached knowers of an external world, but perhaps we are more like Wigner, watching the sealed door of consciousness, trying to guess what lies inside. And perhaps we are also the friend inside the room, seeing something we cannot yet explain, part of a universe that does not fully reveal itself, no matter how long we stare. So what then is real? The cat in the box, the spin of the particle, the answer from the friend. Maybe reality is not something to be found, but something to be made. Maybe truth is not absolute, but relational. Maybe every observation is an act of creation, and every moment is a choice between infinite possible worlds. And if that is so, then awareness, your awareness, is not a small thing. It is a key, a turning point, a center of experience around which reality organizes. The question is not whether the wave function collapses when observed. The question is, who is observing the observer? Where does the chain end? Does it ever? The story of Wigner's friend does not end with an answer. It ends with a door between perspectives, a door that never quite opens, a door that invites you to wonder, how do you know what is real? And who else might be looking back at you through the veil? Perhaps the universe is not a single shared stage, but a hall of mirrors, a theater of perspectives, a dream that dreams itself, again and again, through every possible lens. And somewhere, quietly, you are both inside the room and waiting outside the door. Boltzmann brain. Close your eyes. Picture the vastness of space, empty, cold, and silent. 1 trillion years have passed. Stars have faded. Galaxies are scattered ghosts. Time stretches on into near eternity. And then, from the endless darkness, something stirs. Not a planet, not a sun, but a thought. A single mind floating in the void. It has no body, no past, no future, just awareness. A moment of consciousness. A fleeting glimpse of a world that never was. This is the unsettling vision known as the Boltzmann brain. Named after the 19th century physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, the Boltzmann brain is a paradox, a thought experiment that challenges our understanding of the universe, of entropy, and of what it means to exist. It asks a simple but haunting question. If random fluctuations in the universe can create order, could they also spontaneously create a conscious mind? And if so, is it more likely that you are one of those minds, hallucinating a universe, rather than a human being born into a real, shared reality? To understand this, we must first visit the world of thermodynamics. Boltzmann was one of the first to link entropy, disorder, with probability. In a system like a gas in a box, the particles will naturally move toward the most probable state, one of disorder. This is why things tend to fall apart. Ice melts. Buildings crumble. Stars burn out. This movement toward higher entropy is what gives time its arrow, pushing us from past to future. But Boltzmann also realized that in a system of infinite time, rare fluctuations can occur. If you wait long enough, matter might randomly arrange into a lower entropy state, a bubble of order in a sea of chaos. It's incredibly unlikely, but not impossible. Given enough time, almost anything can happen. This is where the paradox begins. If the universe is eternal, and if fluctuations can create order, then it's far more likely to get a small, brief fluctuation, like a single brain with false memories, than a vast, low-entropy universe like ours. In other words, instead of imagining that we evolved through billions of years in a real cosmos, it's statistically more likely that you are a brain that just appeared, complete with the illusion of history, language, and identity. That everything you see, your hands, your room, the stars outside, is part of that illusion. It's disturbing, isn't it? This idea that your entire life might be a flicker of imagination in the mind of a disembodied brain. No real past. No real world. Just a self-contained moment that vanishes as quickly as it arose. And the worst part, from the inside you'd never know. Everything would feel exactly as it does now. The taste of coffee, the weight of sorrow, the joy of memory. All perfect, all fake. This is the Boltzmann brain problem. It suggests that if our universe is governed by entropy, and if it lasts forever, then conscious minds like this would vastly outnumber real, evolved beings. It would mean that most observers are not people, they're fluctuations. Brains without bodies, thoughts without substance. And that leads to a terrifying conclusion. If most conscious beings are Boltzmann brains, then statistically, you are too. But how do we escape this nightmare? How do we convince ourselves that we are real? That the world is not an illusion created by a freak fluctuation of atoms? Some physicists argue that this very paradox is evidence that our understanding of cosmology must be wrong, that we need a universe that doesn't allow for infinite time, that somehow suppresses these random brains. Others suggest that the laws of quantum mechanics or the structure of inflationary space-time make Boltzmann brains incredibly unlikely. But the truth is, we don't fully know. What makes the Boltzmann brain so haunting is not just the physics, but the existential weight it carries. It forces us to ask, what is more real, experience or origin? If all your thoughts and memories are intact, does it matter where they came from? If you feel love, wonder, fear, does it make a difference whether those feelings are rooted in a long personal history or in a random twitch of entropy? Can truth be measured only by continuity? Some say no. They argue that reality must be grounded in causality, that the past must connect to the present. That meaning comes from context. But others say yes, that consciousness itself is what gives meaning, that the simple fact of experience is enough, that if a Boltzmann brain feels alive, then in that moment it is. The question also touches the core of identity. Who are you if your memories could be fabricated, if everything you know could be false? In some ways, this is not just about physics. It is about epistemology, the study of how we know what we know. The Boltzmann brain is the quantum cousin of Descartes' evil demon, or the brain in a vat scenario. It is a modern echo of an ancient doubt. How can we trust our minds when they are the very tools we use to examine themselves? And yet, even in the face of this uncertainty, something persists. A feeling, a presence, a here-ness that cannot be denied. Maybe that is what we hold on to, not the facts of the past, but the felt experience of now, the breath, the awareness, the moment unfolding. Whether we are Boltzmann brains or biological beings, this moment is ours. It is happening. It is real, at least to us. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps meaning is not something imposed from the outside, but something grown from within. Perhaps even a fleeting consciousness, born from chance, can hold something sacred. The Boltzmann brain reminds us not to take reality for granted, not to assume the world is fixed or given, but also not to be paralyzed by doubt. Because even in uncertainty, there can be wonder. Even in questions, there can be beauty. And maybe the true lesson of the Boltzmann brain is not fear, but humility. A reminder that our understanding of the universe is still unfolding, that we must move carefully between certainty and speculation, that science is not just a body of knowledge, but a living conversation with mystery. So tonight, if the stars seem far and the mind feels fragile, remember this: you are here. Whatever here means, you are aware. Whatever that awareness is, whether you arose from billions of years of cosmic evolution or from a single improbable fluctuation, you exist. You feel, you wonder. And that wonder is real. Because even if you are a Boltzmann brain dreaming a world into being, there is still a world. There is still a dream. And in that dream, something beautiful is happening. The grandfather paradox. Close your eyes and imagine a machine. Not one of gears and steam, but something quieter, stranger. A chamber that hums softly, waiting for a command. A machine that doesn't move through space, but through time. You step inside. Set the dial. And in a flicker, you are gone, no longer in the now, but in the past. You've traveled back to a time before your birth. A time when your grandfather is still young. You see him from across the street, unaware of your presence. But then a question surfaces in your mind, quiet, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. What would happen if you prevented his life from continuing? If he never met your grandmother? If your father was never born? Would you still be standing here now? Or would you vanish the moment the act is done? This is the heart of the grandfather paradox, one of the most famous and haunting puzzles in the philosophy of time. It presents a contradiction. If time travel to the past is possible, and if changing the past is possible, then what happens when a traveler undoes the conditions of their own existence? The paradox gets its name from a simple scenario. If you go back in time and prevent your grandfather from having children, then you will never be born. But if you're never born, you could never go back in time to do it. So what happens? Is reality torn? Does logic break? Or does the universe find a way to protect itself? The paradox is not about violence, it's about causality, about how events are connected like links in a chain. Cause and effect. If it leads to B and B leads to C, then C cannot go back and erase A without erasing itself. This recursive loop forms a contradiction, a logical impossibility. And yet, the idea of time travel continues to fascinate us, because we feel somewhere deep inside that time may not be as linear as it seems. In science fiction, the grandfather paradox appears in many forms. A man goes back and stops a war, but now has no reason to return. A woman meets her past self and gives her advice, but that advice is what led her to go back in the first place. These loops challenge our notions of free will and determinism. If the past can be changed, then the present becomes unstable. But if it cannot be changed, then time becomes a rigid structure, unyielding and fixed. Physicists have taken these questions seriously. In the framework of Einstein's theory of relativity, time is a dimension, much like space, and certain solutions to the equations, such as closed time-like curves, suggest that looping paths through time may be mathematically possible. Wormholes, black holes, and other exotic structures have been proposed as theoretical gateways. But these possibilities raise deep concerns. If the laws of physics allow time travel, do they also allow paradox? Or does something prevent it? One resolution is known as the Novikov self-consistency principle. It suggests that even if you travel back in time, you cannot create a paradox. The universe simply won't let you. Every event in the past is fixed and self-consistent. If you try to change something, something else will stop you. The gun jams. The person escapes. You fail not by coincidence, but by necessity. This principle keeps the timeline intact, but at a cost. It implies that your actions are predetermined, that even when you travel through time, you are not free. Another approach is the many worlds interpretation. When you travel back and make a change, You don't alter your own timeline. You create a new one, a branch, a parallel universe. In that world, your grandfather never had children, but your original timeline remains untouched. You were born there. You left it. You created another. No paradox, just divergence. Infinite timelines, infinite variations, a multiverse of possibilities. But even this solution raises questions. What is you if there are countless versions? If you can jump between timelines like stepping between rooms, is there a true self, a single history? Or are you a wave flowing across many branches, always shifting, never fixed? The grandfather paradox forces us to confront the fragility of identity. It asks, are we the product of a single path or a bundle of potentials? If the past shapes us and we can reshape the past, then what anchors us to anything? Perhaps time, like selfhood, is not a line but a loop, not a river but a sea. It also makes us wonder about the nature of memory. If you go back and change the past, do your memories change too? Or do you remember a reality that no longer exists? Are you haunted by echoes of a timeline that once was, but now never will be? Memory becomes unreliable. History becomes unstable. And truth becomes a question, not a certainty. In this way, the grandfather paradox becomes more than a problem of physics. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of our longing to change the past, to undo regret, to fix mistakes. Who hasn't wished for a second chance? A different choice. A moment to say what was left unsaid? Time travel tempts us because it offers control over what feels unchangeable. But the paradox reminds us that control has consequences, that every change ripples, that identity, memory, and meaning are woven into time itself. And yet, even in the shadow of this paradox, there is something poetic. The very impossibility of it makes the present more precious. If we cannot change the past, then we must live with it, honor it, learn from it. If time is fragile, then so are we. And maybe that fragility is not a flaw, but a form of beauty. Imagine, again, the time machine. But this time you don't go back to change, you go back to understand. To see your grandfather not as a figure in a paradox, but as a human being. To witness the small choices that led to your existence. To feel the weight of time, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a story to listen to. Maybe that's the real power of the paradox, not to break the rules, but to see them more clearly. To accept that time, like life, flows in only one direction, but leaves questions behind it like footprints in the dust. In the end, the grandfather paradox may not be about time travel at all. It may be about boundaries, between action and outcome, between past and present, between desire and reality. It reminds us that some doors once closed remain closed, that some things once done echo forever. And yet, in that echo, we find the mystery of being. So the next time you find yourself wishing to change the past, remember the paradox. Remember the loops and the layers, the questions without answers, and let that remind you to cherish the moment you're in. Because this moment is the only one not bound by contradiction. It is the only point where choice still lives. Time may not let us go backward, but it does let us go forward with awareness, with intention, and with the quiet knowledge that, paradox or not, we are here. Sorite's paradox, the heap. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a single grain of sand, small, insignificant. You place it on the table in front of you. Then you add another and another. Slowly, gently, the pile grows. A few grains become a cluster. The cluster becomes a mound. Eventually, a heap. But here's the question. At what point does the collection become a heap? Is there a precise moment when the heap appears? Or does it emerge gradually, slipping past our definitions without ever announcing itself? This quiet, ancient puzzle is known as the Sorite's paradox, sometimes called the paradox of the heap. The word sorits comes from the Greek sarits, meaning heap. The paradox has existed for centuries, going all the way back to the days of classical Greek philosophy. At its core is a simple structure, a form of reasoning that begins with an assumption so intuitive that few ever question it. That one grain of sand does not make a heap. That adding one grain cannot turn a non-heap into a heap. And yet, repeat this logic enough times and you're left with something absurd. 1,000 grains of sand and still no heap. Of course, we know this isn't true. We recognize a heap when we see one. But the paradox lies in the vagueness, in the boundaries that refuse to stay fixed. If no single grain makes the difference, then how do we explain the transformation? How do we define the line between not yet, now it is? The Sorite's paradox exposes something deep and uncomfortable about language, logic, and perception. That some concepts, especially the ones we use every day, are built not on hard edges, but on soft, shifting ground. This isn't just about sand. The same structure applies to all kinds of things. When does a person go bald? When enough hairs fall out. But how many is enough? If removing one hair doesn't make a person bald, then when do they become bald? Is a person tall? At what exact height? Are they old? When does youth end? When does a crowd become a mob? When does dusk become night? We live in a world of continuums, but we speak in categories. And somewhere in between, logic falters. The Sorite's paradox plays with this fragility. It shows us how small changes, repeated consistently, can lead to big contradictions. It whispers a question into our minds. Can we trust categories at all? Or are they merely conveniences, tools we use to make sense of something much more fluid than we admit? Philosophers have tried to resolve the paradox in different ways. One response is fuzzy logic, a system where truth is not binary, but graded. In fuzzy logic, statements are not simply true or false, but fall somewhere along a spectrum. The statement "this is a heap" might be 60% true. This person is old might be 85% true. It's a way of embracing the in-between, of formalizing vagueness. But for many, this feels unsatisfying, as if we're patching over a deeper problem without truly understanding it. Another approach is to deny the logic of the argument itself. To say that while each step feels reasonable, the accumulation of steps leads us astray. That we are misapplying a type of logic meant for clear-cut terms to concepts that were never meant to be absolute. The word heap wasn't designed to withstand this level of scrutiny. It evolved through use, not precision. It works in conversation, not calculus. And perhaps that's the deeper lesson of the Sorite's paradox. That much of what we believe to be solid is actually soft. That many of the labels we carry, intelligent, beautiful, rich, worthy, are not fixed truths, but linguistic gradients. We live by definitions that can never be fully defined. We draw lines that are always moving. But this is not necessarily a flaw. There is also something human in vagueness, something tender. We are not machines. We are not binary. We grow, change, evolve, not in steps, but in spirals. The paradox is only a problem if we demand perfect clarity. If we let go of that need, the world opens into something richer, more complex, more alive. Think about how we grow old. There is no morning you wake up and suddenly become old. It happens slowly, invisibly, day by day. And yet, one day you realize your hands have changed. Your reflection looks back differently. Not because of a single moment, but because of the accumulation of subtle shifts. Life is not made of sharp turns, but of gradual curves. Or think about love. When do you fall in love? Is there a precise moment? A measurable point? Probably not. It begins with a glance, a laugh, a shared silence, small things repeated and remembered. The heart doesn't leap, it leans. One grain at a time, until something indistinct becomes undeniable. The Sorite's paradox doesn't just challenge logic, it reflects life. It shows us how the biggest changes often arrive unnoticed, how transformation is often quiet, how becoming happens slowly, until suddenly we are someone new. One decision may not change you, but 100 small choices will. And you may not see it happening until you look back and wonder how you ever lived before. In this way, the paradox becomes a mirror, not a problem to solve, but a truth to observe. It invites us to look closely at the stories we tell, about ourselves, about others, about the world. It reminds us that every label we use, happy, strong, broken, brave, is a kind of shorthand, a way of simplifying something that is always more complex. So how do we live with the paradox? How do we move through a world where the lines blur and meanings shift? We accept that not every question has a clean answer, that not every boundary needs to be defined. We recognize that some things are best understood not by dissecting them, but by experiencing them, that a heap is not a number, but a feeling. That old age is not a threshold, but a passage. That identity is not a box, but a horizon. And most importantly, we learn to be gentle with others and with ourselves. Because if there is no precise line between failure and progress, between lost and found, then we must be patient. If one step does not make the difference, then every step matters. Growth is not a moment, it is a process. And in that process, we find the shape of who we are becoming. So the next time you feel stuck in between, lost in a gray area, unsure of what label applies, remember the Sorites paradox. Remember the heap. Remember that the boundaries were always imaginary, that the truth lies not in the line but in the space around it, that life doesn't demand definition, it asks for presence. Because in the end, we are all just collections of grains, moments, memories, thoughts, slowly forming something more, something vague, something beautiful, something that cannot quite be named but is deeply, unmistakably real. Ship of Theseus. Imagine an ancient ship resting in a quiet harbor. Its hull glistens in the morning light, sails folded neatly, ropes coiled with care. This is the ship of Theseus, hero of Athens, preserved for generations to honor his voyages. Over time, the wood begins to rot. Piece by piece, the decaying planks are removed and replaced with new timber. First a board, then a beam, then a mast. Until one day, every part of the ship has been substituted. And then a question drifts into your mind. Is it still the same ship? This is the essence of the Ship of Theseus paradox, an ancient philosophical riddle that has survived the centuries not because it is easy to solve, but because it refuses to be solved. It sits quietly in the background of our lives, asking something deeply human: what makes something itself over time? If all the parts have changed, yet the name and form remain, does identity survive? Or does it vanish quietly in the act of transformation? At first, the answer seems simple. Of course, it's still the Ship of Theseus. It's been preserved in honor, maintained carefully, and serves the same symbolic purpose. But then another layer appears. If none of the original parts remain, what connects the present ship to the one that set sail long ago? Is identity found in the material? In the memory? In the function? Or in something else entirely? And the puzzle doesn't end there. Suppose a curious philosopher gathered all the discarded planks over time, stored them in a warehouse, and slowly rebuilt the ship from its original materials. Now you have two ships, one made of new wood, standing in the harbor, and one made of the old wood, restored piece by piece, which is the real Ship of Theseus. The one that has continuity of history and function, or the one that holds the original matter? The paradox deepens. Not because it's about boats, but because it reflects something fundamental about identity, especially personal identity. We too change piece by piece. Our cells die and regenerate. Our thoughts shift. Our memories blur. The person you were 10 years ago is not the same person you are today, and yet you still call yourself you? Why? What makes you you? Is it your body? Your brain? Your personality? Your memories? All of these things can change, and often do. A scar changes the skin. Experience reshapes belief. A moment of trauma can erase a decade of memories. And yet, the thread of self feels unbroken. Somewhere, somehow we believe in continuity. But where does that continuity reside? Some philosophers argue that identity lies in psychological continuity, in the pattern of memory, intention, and consciousness that flows through time. That as long as your thoughts and experiences connect, you remain. Others say it's a matter of function, that as long as the system behaves consistently, the identity is preserved. Still others believe in something more elusive, a soul, a spark, a metaphysical essence that endures despite all change. The Ship of Theseus forces us to ask whether identity is fixed or fluid, whether it's something we own or something we enact. Maybe identity is not a static thing to be discovered, but a dynamic process to be lived. Maybe you are less like a statue and more like a story, rewritten, reinterpreted, revised with every passing year. And what about relationships? When we fall in love with someone, who are we loving, their present form or their evolving essence? If they change over time, as we all do, does the love fade, or does it deepen with change? The paradox touches even the most tender aspects of our lives. It reminds us that everything is always moving, that even those we know best are not quite the same from one moment to the next. The paradox also echoes in modern life. Consider a smartphone. You replace the battery, then the screen, the motherboard. Eventually, every part is replaced. Is it still your phone? Or did it quietly become something else while you weren't looking? What about software? What about artificial intelligence, learning and evolving every day? If it rewrites its own code, updates its memories, and transforms its behavior, does its identity persist? In a world of constant change, the paradox is everywhere. In technology, in nature, in ourselves. Trees lose their leaves and grow new ones. Rivers flow, yet remain. Languages evolve. Cultures shift, and yet we name them as if they're singular, as if they're stable. But stability, it seems, is an illusion built on change. Identity, a concept born of contradiction. So how do we live with this? How do we hold on to something that's always slipping through our fingers? Perhaps we begin by embracing impermanence, by understanding that identity does not depend on sameness, but on continuity through change. That who you are is not found in any single moment, but in the movement from one to the next. Like a melody, you are not one note, but the pattern they form. Like a flame, you are not the firewood, but the burning. The ship of Theseus teaches us that change is not the enemy of identity, it is its condition. That transformation does not break the self, it builds it. That every new plank is not a loss, but a step. And that even when nothing remains of what once was, something deeper may endure. And perhaps the real answer lies not in choosing which ship is the true one, but in recognizing that both are. That identity is not a single thread, but a weave of material and memory, of story and structure, of body and belief. That what matters is not the origin, but the arc. Not the pieces, but the pattern. So the next time you wonder who you are, pause, breathe, and remember, you are the ship and the sea, the traveler and the journey. You are not who you were, and not yet who you will be. You are becoming. And in that becoming, you remain. Solipsism. Close your eyes and listen to the silence behind your thoughts, behind the noise of the world, behind the voice that speaks within. There is something still, something private, something unshareable. That silent core, your awareness, is the only thing you have ever truly known. You have never stepped outside it, never left your own mind. Everything you've seen, heard, touched, or imagined has appeared within it. And that raises a haunting, elegant possibility. What if nothing else exists? What if you are the only consciousness there is? This is the question at the heart of solipsism, the philosophical idea that only your own mind can be known to exist, that the external world, other people, even time and space, may not be real in the way you assume. They may be dreams, simulations, shadows, or projections from the single light of your own consciousness. You might be a solitary witness in an empty theater, watching a movie called reality, mistaking it for something shared. The idea is not new. It echoes through the writings of ancient skeptics, reappears in Eastern philosophies, and finds sharp expression in modern thought. But it is not a belief, exactly. It is a problem, a limit, a line we cannot cross. Because even the most certain knowledge of others, of history, of science, has always arrived through experience, and experience is always internal. You've never directly touched another mind, never looked out through someone else's eyes. You only believe they exist because of the behaviors they display. But those behaviors, voices, words, gestures, are things you perceive, and perception lives only in you. So how do you know the world is real? How do you know the people around you are conscious like you? How do you know they aren't clever illusions, characters in a dream you don't know you're dreaming? Solipsism doesn't claim that others don't exist. It simply points out that you can never prove that they do. That every shred of evidence for the external world comes filtered through your own awareness, a wall you cannot scale, a veil you cannot lift. And once you begin to reflect on that deeply, something begins to shift. The coffee you drink, the book you read, the memory of a voice, the color of a sky, the weight of your own name. These things feel real. They move you. But in solipsism, they may be like thoughts in a quiet mind. Appearances, rising and falling, playing their part. And when they disappear, they leave nothing behind but the watcher, the presence, you. For some, this idea brings fear, a sense of isolation. a chilling silence behind the illusion of connection. But for others, it opens a strange kind of peace, a chance to realize that the world is not distant, it is intimate, that what you experience is not a wall between you and others, but the form through which you meet yourself. If solipsism is true, then the world you know is yours, not yours to control, but yours in origin, a mirror made of light. Think of a dream. In dreams, people talk to you. You feel emotion, pain, joy, but it's all coming from you. Your subconscious mind constructs an entire world with architecture, weather, language, and you don't question it until you wake up. What if waking is just another dream with stricter rules? What if your entire waking life is a sustained illusion, coherent and predictable, but still generated by a single mind, yours? Philosophers like Descartes struggled with this very question. His famous declaration, "I think, therefore I am," was born out of radical doubt. He realized that all his beliefs about the world could be wrong, that he could be deceived, that even his senses might lie. But one thing he thought was undeniable, the fact that he was thinking. That, at least, proved that something existed, namely the self. But Descartes never resolved how to prove that anything else existed. Modern thinkers have tried. They've appealed to intersubjectivity, the shared language, the agreement between minds, the consistent structure of the world. But all of this, solipsism replies, could still be part of the illusion, a clever consistency, a simulation that never glitches. Even when you hold another's hand or feel their love, you only experience your experience of it, never them directly. And so, the doubt remains. Solipsism is not popular. Most reject it not because it's been disproven, but because it is unlivable. We act as if others are real, because it is the only way to live meaningfully. We love, we grieve, we trust, we build. And maybe, at some level, the usefulness of the belief is a kind of truth. Perhaps solipsism is like a mirror too clear to stare into for long. We glance, then turn away, not because we're blind, but because we need the illusion to function. But what if we stay for a moment? What if we let the idea deepen? What if the world is your mind, dreaming in full color? Then everything is a message. Every voice, every moment, every struggle, an echo of something within. Then the people you meet are parts of you. The weather is your mood. The news is your shadow. You are not trapped in solipsism. You are expanding through it. The only mind becomes the only mirror. The world is not outside. It is the expression of your inner life. This idea resonates with non-dual philosophies like Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism, which claim that the self is not the individual ego, but the universal consciousness. That the illusion is not that others are real, but that they are separate. That the self is not a point, but a field. In that light, solipsism and mysticism begin to touch. The boundaries blur. You are not the only mind. You are the mind, the ground of being, the awareness in which the universe appears, and so is everyone else. One mind, dreaming many forms. Solipsism can be cold if we think of it as isolation, but it can also be profound if we see it as non-separation, as a reminder that everything we experience is experienced within, and thus deserves care, kindness, attention. If the world is you, then to hurt another is to hurt yourself. To be cruel is to deny your own reflection. And yet there is humility too, because solipsism doesn't prove that only you exist. It only says that you cannot know otherwise. It invites you to be gentle with your assumptions, to see the fragility of certainty, to move through the world with curiosity instead of conclusion. So what do we do with this? How do we live inside the paradox? We breathe. We observe. We treat each moment as sacred. We don't escape into solipsism, but we let its shadow soften our edges. We stop clinging to the idea that the world must be real in the way we imagine. We stop needing proof of what lies outside, and instead we wake up within. Solipsism, in the end, is not a belief. It is a meditation, a way of seeing, a lens that sharpens the mystery. It cannot be solved. It cannot be escaped, but it can be embraced. So tonight, as you sit quietly with your thoughts, ask not whether the world is real, but whether it matters. Ask not whether others exist, but how you will treat them. Ask not whether you are alone, but whether you are aware. Because in awareness, everything begins. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the only mind is all mind. And in that, you are never truly alone. The problem of induction. The sun has risen every morning of your life. It crests quietly over the horizon, warming the sky with soft light, as if fulfilling a silent promise. And tomorrow, it will rise again. You feel this to be true. You trust it. You plan your day around it. But pause for a moment. How do you know? You've seen it rise many times, but is that proof it always will? Is the past enough to guarantee the future? This is the heart of a quiet but unsettling puzzle in philosophy known as the problem of induction. It was brought into sharp focus by the 18th century philosopher David Hume, who challenged something most of us take for granted, that patterns in the past can reliably predict what comes next, that the universe will behave tomorrow just as it did today, that cause and effect is not just habit, but truth. And once you begin to question this, the world starts to feel more fragile than it did before. Induction is everywhere. It's how we learn, how we grow. We observe patterns, form expectations, and build knowledge. You touch fire, feel heat, and expect the same every time. You see clouds and predict rain. You hear a tone in someone's voice and anticipate what comes next. Scientists gather data, measure outcomes, and form laws. All of it depends on the simple idea that the future will resemble the past. But Hume asked a piercing question. What justifies that belief? Why should the future resemble the past? Why should what has happened countless times continue to happen again? There is no contradiction in the idea that the sun will not rise tomorrow, or that gravity will fail for a moment. It's unlikely, yes, but not impossible. And our certainty, Hume said, is not based on logic. It's based on habit, a mental shortcut. We assume continuity because we are used to it. This makes induction different from deduction. In deductive reasoning, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. But inductive reasoning moves from specific observations to general conclusions. It says this has happened many times, so it will probably happen again. The key word is probably. Induction is never certain. And yet we depend on it for everything from boiling water to flying planes to living our lives. Imagine a turkey on a farm. Every day the farmer feeds it at sunrise. Day after day the pattern holds. The turkey becomes confident. Food always comes in the morning. But one day, instead of food, the farmer comes with a knife. The pattern is broken. The past no longer predicts the future. The turkey's reasoning, while based on consistent data, failed to anticipate the possibility of change. This is the inductive trap. And we are not so different. We believe the elevator will rise when we press the button, that the ground will stay firm beneath our feet. But how many of our beliefs are built not on proof, but on expectation? Hume reminds us that even our most trusted knowledge rests on shaky ground. The laws of physics, the consistency of time, even the continuity of self, none are guaranteed by logic, only by habit. And habit, he says, is not truth. But this doesn't mean we should panic or abandon science. Hume wasn't saying we should stop believing in induction. He was simply pointing out that it's not rationally provable, that it's a kind of faith, practical, useful, and often reliable, but still a leap we take every moment without realizing. So what do we do with this realization? Some philosophers have tried to resolve it. Karl Popper argued that science does not rely on induction, but on falsification, the idea that we can never prove a theory, only disprove it. Instead of building truth from observation, we test ideas and discard those that fail. But even falsification depends on a kind of inductive background. Assuming the same test will yield the same result tomorrow, the shadow of Hume never fully fades. Others suggest that induction is justified pragmatically, that it works, that the world seems regular enough for our purposes, and that's good enough. But this response doesn't solve the problem. It just sidesteps it. It says, yes, the ground beneath our reasoning is uncertain, but it hasn't failed us yet. Comforting, perhaps, but not quite stable. And maybe that's the deeper message of the problem of induction, that uncertainty is not a flaw, it is a feature, that the world is not a machine with fixed gears, but a dance of probabilities. That knowledge is not a fortress, but a raft, floating, adapting, learning as it goes. The problem of induction also holds a mirror to our everyday lives. How many times have we trusted someone because they've always been kind, until one day they weren't? How often have we assumed our health, our routine, our normal would continue until it didn't? Life is a series of inductive bets, some small, some deeply personal. And every time we assume that what has been will continue to be, we are taking a quiet risk. But this also opens space for humility, for awe, for an understanding that the world, for all its patterns, still holds surprise. That every sunrise is not just another sunrise. It is a new event, never guaranteed, always extraordinary. That even the familiar is, at its root, a mystery repeated. So how do we live with the problem of induction? We live gently. We live attentively. We make our predictions, but hold them lightly. We accept that certainty is rare, and that our knowledge is always in motion. And in that acceptance, we find not despair, but clarity. A way to walk through the world with eyes open, not to just what is, but to what might be. Perhaps this is not a flaw in our thinking, but a quiet invitation to remain curious, to never close the book on mystery, to understand that knowing is not an arrival, it is a process, a question that walks beside us, a reminder that even as we trust the rising of the sun, we do so with reverence, not assumption, with gratitude, not entitlement. Because in the end, the problem of induction does not make the world less real. It makes it more alive, more delicate, more worth paying attention to. Each breath, each step, each moment we thought we understood, revealed again as new, as uncertain, as sacred. Mary's room. Imagine a room, perfectly white, sterile, sealed from the world outside. Inside it lives a brilliant scientist named Mary. She has spent her entire life here, studying the science of color, not by seeing it, but by reading about it. For in this room there is no color, only black and white, grayscale diagrams, abstract data, mathematical curves. Mary is the world's leading expert on the neuroscience of vision. She knows everything there is to know about how the eye detects wavelengths, how the brain processes visual signals, how humans describe color. She understands red, intellectually, better than anyone alive. But she has never seen red. And then, one day, the door opens. Mary steps outside. For the first time, she sees a red rose, bright, vivid, undeniably real. And in that moment, something happens. A shift, a feeling, a revelation. She experiences red not as a concept, but as a sensation. And suddenly, a question arises. Did she learn something new? This is the heart of Mary's room, also known as the knowledge argument, first proposed by philosopher Frank Jackson in the 1980s. It's a thought experiment designed to explore one of the deepest mysteries in philosophy of mind. Can physical knowledge explain conscious experience? Or is there something about qualia, the subjective feel of experience, that lies beyond the reach of science? Mary knew all the facts. But when she saw red, did she gain new knowledge? Not data, not numbers, but something else, something ineffable. The feel of color, the inner light of perception, the warmth of redness that no equation can describe. If she learned something new, then it suggests that not all knowledge is physical, that there is a kind of knowing that cannot be captured in third-person language, a first-person truth, a window into what it means to feel. The story of Mary is simple, but its implications are vast. It challenges the idea that the universe is entirely material, that everything can be reduced to atoms, forces, and interactions. If Mary learns something new upon seeing red, then conscious experience must be more than physical structure. There is something irreducible, something non-physical, or at least non-functional, a layer of mind that resists being pinned down. This is what philosophers call qualia, the raw feel of experience, the redness of red, the bitterness of coffee, the ache of sorrow. These are not just reactions, they are inner textures, and Mary's room brings them into focus. It asks whether a perfect map can substitute for the land it describes, whether all the information in the world can replace the feeling of actually being there. Some argue that Mary's experience proves a point, that consciousness cannot be explained away, that something about it is fundamentally different from physical facts. Others disagree. They say Mary doesn't learn new information, she gains a new ability. She now knows what it's like to see red, but doesn't gain a new fact. Her knowledge hasn't expanded, her perspective has. This is the ability hypothesis, an attempt to defend materialism against the slippery force of qualia. Still others suggest that Mary gains a new representation of the same information, that her brain simply forms a new internal model, one she couldn't build in the room. Nothing mystical, just a shift in neural patterns, a physical update. But even then, the problem lingers. Why does it feel like something? Why does red not just register but shine? The story of Mary also touches on a deeper longing, the longing to understand experience from the inside, to bridge the gap between objective explanation and subjective life. You can know everything about music theory, but it won't prepare you for hearing your favorite song in the dark. You can study love scientifically, but that won't capture the sting of a broken heart. There is a gulf between describing and being, and Mary's room stands quietly on the edge of that divide. But perhaps the point is not to resolve the paradox, but to feel its weight, to recognize that knowledge is layered, that there are ways of knowing that are not reducible to facts, that to be alive is not merely to compute, but to feel from within. Mary's room reminds us that no matter how much we explain the brain, something about the mind still escapes. It also mirrors something deeply human, the tension between knowing and living. You can know that a fire burns, but only by placing your hand above the flame do you truly grasp its warmth. You can understand everything about grief, but only when it sits in your chest like stone do you understand its shape. Mary's room is a metaphor for that gap, the space between reading about life and living it. And in another way, the room is something we all live in. We all start in our own versions of Mary's room, closed off, protected, informed but untouched. And then life opens the door. We step outside. We feel. We fall. We see colors we didn't know we were missing. Some of those colors are beautiful. Some are painful, but all of them are real. So, what do we make of Mary's room? Perhaps it reminds us that consciousness is not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be honored. That the mind is not a machine, but a window. That there are kinds of truth that cannot be spoken, only lived. The story doesn't ask us to reject science. It simply asks us to see its limits, to understand that not everything can be diagrammed, that some truths live in the seeing, not in the saying. And perhaps it tells us something else too, that each of us is Mary, in our own way, learning, waiting, gathering knowledge, and then stepping out into a world that refuses to be flattened, into a world filled with color, with sound, with depth, into a world that will not always make sense, but will always be vivid. So tonight, as you sit quietly in your own room, ask yourself, what have I read but not yet felt? What have I studied but not yet lived? What color waits for me just beyond the door? Because some things can't be understood from a book. They can only be known when the door opens and the light rushes in. Philosophical zombies. Imagine a world that is just like ours. Same skies, same oceans, same languages and cities. The people walk, talk, smile, and cry. They hold hands. They write poetry. They speak about pain and love and joy. But something is missing, something crucial, yet invisible. In this world, no one is actually conscious. There is no inner life, no thoughts behind the words, no feelings behind the faces. Everyone behaves exactly like you, but no one is home inside. This is the idea of the philosophical zombie, not the kind from horror movies, but a thought experiment born from philosophy of mind. It asks a haunting question. Could there be beings who are physically identical to us in every way, yet lack conscious experience? If so, what does that mean about the nature of consciousness itself? The scenario is often credited to philosopher David Chalmers, who introduced it as part of his argument against materialism. He calls consciousness the hard problem, not because it is difficult, but because it refuses to be explained in purely physical terms. We can describe how the brain processes information, how neurons fire, how language is produced, but none of this tells us why it feels like something to be alive, why pain hurts, why colors glow, why music moves us. A philosophical zombie, or P-zombie, behaves exactly like a human. If you poke it, it says ouch. If you ask it how it feels, it answers with believable emotion. But it is not feeling anything. There is no subjective experience, no qualia. It is a perfect replica, hollow on the inside. This raises a deep challenge to physicalism. The idea that everything about the mind can be explained in terms of the physical world. If it's possible to imagine a being that is physically identical to you, but lacks your inner life, then consciousness must be something extra, something beyond neurons, something not captured by the laws of physics. The P-zombie is not meant to exist in the real world. It is a mirror, a tool for thinking. It asks, is consciousness logically separable from behavior? And if so, then doesn't that mean that consciousness is non-physical, something fundamental, but not reducible? Critics respond quickly. They argue that if a creature behaves as if it's conscious, it must be conscious, that behavior and experience are inseparable, that to speak of a being who is indistinguishable from a human in every way, except for consciousness, is like imagining a flame that gives no light and no heat. The concept, they say, collapses. But the intuition behind the zombie lingers. After all, we only know consciousness from the inside. We cannot observe it directly. We infer it in others based on what they do, what they say, how they react. But what if all of that could be simulated? Could there be a world where consciousness never emerges, yet all behavior remains? This question leads us deeper into the explanatory gap, the space between physical facts and subjective experience. Why does red feel like red? Why does chocolate taste the way it does? No amount of objective data seems to fully capture that what it's like quality. The P-zombie is a symbol of that gap, a figure that haunts the edges of scientific explanation. It also speaks to something intimate, our isolation. You've never seen someone else's pain. You've never felt someone else's joy. You've only experienced your own and believed others have something similar. But if philosophical zombies are logically possible, then belief alone is not proof. Then other minds become invisible assumptions. And what about artificial intelligence? Could a machine that mimics human behavior ever be truly conscious? Or would it be a kind of P-zombie? A shell of code, sophisticated and persuasive, but ultimately empty? This is not just theory. As machines grow more lifelike, the line between appearance and awareness becomes harder to draw. The zombie question returns, again and again, as a ghost in the machine. But perhaps the deepest part of this thought experiment lies not in others, but in yourself. How do you know you are not a zombie? You think, you feel, but could you prove that experience to anyone else? Could someone else be fooled by your behavior into believing you are conscious, even if you weren't? The zombie makes us question not just the minds of others, but the certainty of our own. Philosophers have proposed many views in response. Some say that consciousness is an emergent property, not separate from the brain, but arising from complexity. Others claim that experience is fundamental, woven into the fabric of the universe like space and time. And some, like illusionists, argue that consciousness itself is a kind of trick, that the feeling of being aware is not what it seems. But the zombie remains, silent, staring, asking, why does anything feel like anything? And perhaps that's the gift of the P-zombie, not to answer the question, but to preserve the mystery, to remind us that there is more to being human than circuits, synapses, and behavior, that we are not just machines that move, but beings that feel. So what do we do with this idea? We reflect. We notice. We stop assuming that understanding function is the same as understanding feeling. We remember that behind every person is a world we can never fully enter. That consciousness is not just a scientific challenge, it is a spiritual one. To be aware is to hold the infinite within the finite. To see the world, not just from the outside, but from within. And maybe the question isn't whether others are zombies. Maybe the question is, how deeply can we listen? How fully can we honor the mystery of another's experience? Not to solve it, but to stand beside it. Not to dissect it, but to hold it in wonder. Because even if we are alone in our awareness, the possibility that others are aware too, truly, vividly, inwardly, makes compassion the only reasonable response. In the end, the zombie is not a monster. It is a mirror, a way of seeing consciousness not as an answer, but as a question that breathes, a question that waits, a question that looks out through your eyes and wonders what it means to be alive. Inverted spectrum. Imagine waking up one morning and looking at the sky. It's blue, as it always has been. You glance at a ripe strawberry, bright red, familiar. You stop at a traffic light and know that red means stop, green means go. Everything is as it should be. But what if quietly, without anyone knowing, your inner experience of color had shifted? What if what you now call blue is what others call red? What if your entire color world is inverted, but your behavior, your language, your reactions remain unchanged? This is the haunting idea behind the inverted spectrum thought experiment. It explores the possibility that two people could perceive colors completely differently, yet never know. That the inner experience of red for one person could be what another person experiences as green. And because they've learned to use the same words and respond the same way, the difference remains invisible, trapped inside, unprovable. The question is not whether your eyes work or whether your brain processes signals correctly. It's about qualia, the private, subjective texture of experience, what it's like to see red or green or purple. We know how light wavelengths interact with the eye. We know how those signals are translated into neural activity, but we do not know and cannot know how those signals feel from the inside. And here lies the paradox. Imagine two people, you and someone else. You both look at the same apple. You both call it red. You both stop at red lights and love crimson roses. But inside, the colors might be completely flipped. Your red might be their green, your blue their yellow. And no experiment, no test, no scan could reveal the difference. Behaviorally, you are identical, but experientially, you may live in different worlds. This is the power of the inverted spectrum. It doesn't claim this is happening, it simply asks, could it be? And if it could, then what does that say about consciousness? About communication? About how we relate to others? The thought experiment first took root in early modern philosophy. John Locke introduced a version of it in the 17th century. He wondered whether a person who had always seen red as green might use all the same words correctly, while experiencing the world completely differently. Centuries later, philosophers like Thomas Nagel and Frank Jackson revived the idea in debates about the mind and the limits of physical explanation. It became a central piece in discussions of qualia and subjective experience, those elusive qualities that no microscope can reveal. If color experience can be inverted without behavioral change, then qualia are not functionally defined. That is, they are not determined by input and output alone. And if that's true, then consciousness cannot be fully explained by physical processes. There's a gap, a mystery, a space between the world we measure and the world we feel. Some materialist philosophers resist the inverted spectrum. They argue that if inner experiences differ, there must be some detectable difference, some neural signature, some cognitive variation. Otherwise, the inversion is meaningless. If two people act the same in all contexts, then their qualia must be the same. Anything else they say is just fantasy. But the inverted spectrum presses on, quietly, persistently. Because even if the idea is untestable, it still seems possible. And if it's possible, it reshapes everything we assume about the mind. It reveals the isolation of experience, that we may never truly know what it is like to be someone else, that even in our most shared moments, seeing the same sunset, admiring the same painting, we might be gazing through different internal lenses. And this doesn't only apply to color. It could be taste, emotion, sound. What if your experience of pain is my experience of pressure? What if your sorrow feels like my emptiness? What if our inner worlds are more different than we imagine? And yet, despite this, we speak, we love, we build bridges through language, art, and empathy. The inverted spectrum shows us how fragile those bridges are, but also how beautiful. That even if we never experience the world in exactly the same way, we still reach out, still try to understand, still find meaning and connection. In a strange way, the thought experiment invites humility. It reminds us that our reality is just one version, that our perceptions are filtered, shaped, and private, that what seems universal may only be personal. And this makes our shared efforts, our agreements, our rituals, our common languages, all the more extraordinary. Some variations of the thought experiment add a deeper twist. Suppose you've always had an inverted spectrum, but the inversion was systematic, applied equally across all colors. You were taught to call this red and that green, and your brain consistently translated wavelengths accordingly. You would never notice, nor would anyone else. The inversion is undetectable, yet it redefines your entire experience of the world. And so, the question remains, is consciousness something public or something hidden? If two people behave the same, are they the same inside? Or can subjectivity diverge from the physical in ways we'll never see? Some scientists respond with optimism. They believe that as brain imaging improves, we'll be able to decode subjective states, to map qualia onto neural patterns, and build a universal index of experience. But even then, would the map be the territory? Would knowing how a brain encodes red let you know how red feels? Would knowing my neural signature for joy let you feel my joy? The inverted spectrum says maybe not. Maybe some truths can only be lived, not described, not measured, just felt. But it also offers another insight. That experience, no matter how private, is real. That even if we can't prove how it feels to see red, we know that it feels like something. And that is enough to show that consciousness is not an illusion, not a trick or a side effect, but a fact, a presence that cannot be ignored. And perhaps that's where the inverted spectrum leaves us, not with answers, but with a sense of reverence for each moment of experience, for the mystery behind every glance, for the unprovable light in someone else's eyes. So the next time you see red, pause. Notice it, not just as a label, but as a feeling. Let yourself wonder, what does it feel like to someone else? What does their world look like from the inside? Not to solve the question, but to sit with it, to honor the mystery, to remember that beneath our shared sky, we may be living in beautifully different worlds. And that's not something to fear. It's something to love. Last Thursdayism. What if the universe began last Thursday, not in metaphor, but literally? Every tree, every mountain, every drop of rain, created just a few days ago. Not only the stars in the sky, but also your memories, your childhood photos, and even the fossil record, all fabricated as part of that creation. Your body bears the marks of time, scars, wrinkles, and old injuries, but they too were placed there, as if to tell a story that never happened. Your journals, your friendships, even this moment of listening, it all began just last Thursday. This is the strange and unsettling proposition known as last Thursdayism. At first, it sounds absurd, but its roots lie in a much older idea, the Omphalos hypothesis. In 1857, a man named Philip Gauss proposed that God could have created the earth with the appearance of age, that Adam was made with a navel, and omphalos, Greek for navel, even though he was never born, that trees had rings, rocks had fossils, and light from distant stars had already begun its journey toward Earth, even though the universe had just been formed. In other words, the world looks ancient, but only because it was created to look that way. Last Thursdayism is a modern, tongue-in-cheek extension of this idea. It imagines that the entire universe came into existence last Thursday, complete with a full backstory, historical records, family albums, and scientific data, all preloaded, like a memory card inserted into a cosmic device. And if this were true, how would you know? What test could prove that your memories are real rather than implanted? This is not a claim about theology or science. It's a thought experiment, a way to explore the limits of knowledge, memory, and trust in our perception of time. It forces us to confront a deep philosophical question. How do we know the past really happened? We take comfort in continuity. We remember events. We record history. We trust that what we learn in school reflects something real. But all of that depends on one fragile assumption, that our memories are accurate, and that the evidence around us was caused by real events, not merely fabricated in an instant. But what if all this trust is misplaced? What if it's possible, logically possible, for the universe to have been created recently, with all signs pointing backward toward a fabricated past? It's a dizzying idea, and most reject it outright, not because it's logically impossible, but because it's unfalsifiable. That is, there's no way to prove or disprove it. Any attempt to test the hypothesis would rely on memories and evidence, both of which could have been planted during creation. A universe created last Thursday would include the illusion of history. That means even skepticism itself becomes part of the illusion. This is why philosophers treat last Thursdayism as a challenge to epistemology, the study of knowledge. It asks, what counts as knowing? If you remember something vividly, does that mean it happened? If there are books, videos, and fossils, does that mean they were formed through time? Or could everything be part of a grand and instantaneous design? And so, last Thursdayism becomes a mirror. It reflects our dependence on assumptions we never question. It shows that our belief in the past is not based on certainty, but on coherence. Our memories fit together. The world around us makes sense, and so we accept it as real. But coherence is not the same as truth. The Omphalos hypothesis was meant to resolve a theological problem, how to reconcile a young Earth with scientific evidence of age, but its implications go much deeper. If God or any creator can embed false history into the world, then our reality becomes a story with no reliable narrator. And here, the lines blur between theology, science fiction, and metaphysics, because last Thursdayism is not about religion. It's about the fragility of our assumptions. It's about how easily our trust in memory, evidence, and time can be overturned by one imaginative leap. It also echoes other philosophical dilemmas, like Descartes' evil demon who might deceive us about everything we perceive, or the brain in a vat scenario in which our minds are fed an artificial world, or the simulation hypothesis which suggests our universe could be a programmed illusion. Last Thursdayism sits alongside these ideas, reminding us that even the past is not beyond question. But rather than despair, this thought experiment invites curiosity. It invites us to ask not just how we know the past, but why it matters. If everything you remember, from your first steps to your first love, is only a few days old, does that make those experiences less real? If your feelings were created whole, are they any less true? There is something beautifully unsettling about last Thursdayism. It reminds us that time is not something we touch, it is something we believe in. We measure it with clocks, but we experience it through narrative, through the stories we carry inside us. If those stories were implanted, their emotional weight still lingers. Their meaning still shapes who we are. And so, this strange idea becomes something more. It becomes a reflection on identity. If you were created last Thursday, with all your knowledge, memories, and habits intact, are you any less you? Or are you, in some deep sense, timeless? Philosopher Bertrand Russell dismissed the Omphalos hypothesis by saying that any theory which explains all the evidence equally well, but can never be tested, is pointless. But even if it's not testable, it's not meaningless, because it forces us to look at what we call evidence and ask, what lies beneath it? In that way, last Thursdayism is less about the past and more about the present. It draws our attention to how fragile the present moment is, how all we really have is now, this sliver of time that seems suspended between memory and anticipation. Everything else is interpretation. Everything else is trust. And perhaps, in a strange way, that's the gift of this idea. It frees us. It tells us that even if the past were false, the present is still real. That meaning is not dependent on time's duration, but on time's intensity. Whether a relationship lasted 20 years or 2 days, the feeling it brings you now is still alive. So, if the universe began last Thursday, what does it change? Maybe nothing. Or maybe everything. It invites us to see the world not as a place fixed in history, but as a moment unfolding in mystery. It reminds us that our confidence in the past is an act of faith, not blind faith, but poetic faith. A trust that things are as they seem, not because we can prove it, but because we live inside a story that feels real. And if, one day, we learned that all of it, our lives, our past, our memories, was only a few days old, what would we do? We would go on. We would still watch sunsets. We would still love our families. We would still create wonder and hope. Because even if it all began last Thursday, we are here now. And that, in the end, is all that matters. Berkeley's idealism. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? You've probably heard this question before on coffee mugs, in late-night conversations, or whispered just before sleep when the room feels too still. It's more than a riddle. It's a key to one of the oldest and strangest ideas in the history of philosophy. It leads us into the dreamlike world of George Berkeley and the radical conclusion he came to, that the physical world may not exist independently of our minds. That to be is simply to be perceived. Imagine the tree falling. The moment is quiet, untouched by human eyes. The wind is gentle, the leaves shimmer, and then, suddenly the trunk snaps and the massive body crashes to the ground. But if no one is there to see it, hear it, feel it. Can we truly say that it happened? Does the tree still exist when unobserved? Or does it vanish the moment no mind is watching? For Berkeley, this was not a playful question. It was a statement about the very nature of reality. In the early 1700s, George Berkeley, an Irish philosopher and bishop, proposed something bold and unsettling. All that exists are minds and ideas. Material objects, trees, stones, stars, even your own body, do not exist independently. They exist because they are experienced. They are held in consciousness, and without that, they are nothing. He called this view immaterialism, though today we often call it Berkeley's idealism. The idea is simple and strange. The world is not made of matter, but of perceptions. Things exist not because they are physical, but because they are perceived by some mind. This means that when you leave a room, the objects in it, the chairs, the desk, the books, do not continue to exist in the way we usually assume. They are not floating in space, waiting for you to return. Instead, they exist only insofar as they are being perceived. When you close your eyes, the world slips away. When you turn your back, only what remains in your experience is real. Everything else depends on observation. It's easy to dismiss this at first. Surely the world continues whether we are looking or not. Surely the moon is still there when no one is watching it. But Berkeley would ask, how do you know? Can you ever step outside of perception to verify the independent existence of the world? Every experience you've ever had has been filtered through your senses, processed by your mind. You've never touched matter directly. You've only known your experience of matter. Berkeley's famous phrase captures this core idea. Ses percipi, to be is to be perceived. And yet, he didn't claim the world vanishes every time you close your eyes. He introduced a profound presence behind the curtain. God. For Berkeley, God is the eternal perceiver. When you are not looking, God is. The tree continues to exist, not because it's made of matter, but because it is continuously perceived by the divine mind. This preserves continuity. The world remains stable because it is held in God's awareness, even when you aren't there to witness it. Berkeley's idealism isn't a denial of reality. It's a radical reframing. It suggests that reality is fundamentally mental, not material. That the world is more like a dream, vivid and structured, yet unfolding entirely within consciousness. This vision of reality is deeply disorienting. We are taught from childhood to trust the solidity of things, to believe in a world that exists out there. But Berkeley invites us to look inward, to see that everything we know, the colors, textures, sounds, and forms, is known only in the mind. That the external world is not truly external. It is a theater of experience, projected on the screen of awareness. Think again about the falling tree. In the common view, it makes a sound, vibrations ripple through the air. But what is sound really? Sound is not the vibration itself. Sound is the experience of vibration, translated by your ear and interpreted by your mind. Without a listener, those vibrations exist, perhaps, but there is no sound, only the potential for experience. And here lies the heart of Berkeley's argument. There is no reason to posit a material world beyond perception, because all we have ever known is perception. To assume a hidden, mind-independent world is to go beyond experience, and for Berkeley, that is unnecessary. Reality is nothing more than the totality of perceptions, held in mind, sustained by God. This idea resonates through time. It echoes in quantum physics, where observation seems to affect reality. It whispers in dreams where entire worlds unfold with no material foundation. It aligns with solipsism, but stops short of loneliness. Because in Berkeley's view, we are not alone in our minds. We are immersed in a reality sustained by an ever-present divine consciousness. And yet, it also challenges our sense of control. If the world is mind-dependent, whose mind shapes it? If God is the ultimate perceiver, then reality is not just mental, it is meaningful. Not arbitrary, but purposeful. Not random, but watched. Berkeley's idealism is both terrifying and comforting. It erases the material world we thought we knew and replaces it with something more intimate, a world of thoughts, feelings, and divine presence. A world where nothing exists without awareness, where the act of seeing is not passive, but creative. In this worldview, you are not a speck lost in a vast, indifferent cosmos. You are a center of consciousness, participating in a shared dream. A dream that feels so real it convinces us of solidity, but remains, in the end, a dream of the mind. So the tree falls, and the forest is empty. No ears hear, no eyes see. Does it make a sound? For Berkeley, the answer is yes, if God hears it. And perhaps that is enough. Because whether the world is built from atoms or ideas, what matters is the mystery of perception, the quiet knowing that everything you see, feel, and love is woven from the same invisible thread, awareness. That to exist is not to occupy space, but to occupy attention. That the world you walk through each day is not a place, but a presence. And whether that presence is held by you, by God, or by something beyond all names, it remains the same, silent, shimmering, and inexplicably real. McTaggart's Unreality of Time. Time feels so real to us. We wake to it, age through it, schedule our lives around it. We remember the past, experience the present, and anticipate the future. It seems obvious that time flows forward, moments arriving, passing, and giving way to what comes next. But what if this flow of time is an illusion? What if time, as we experience it, does not exist at all? This is the astonishing claim made by the British philosopher John McTaggart in one of the most intricate and unsettling arguments in modern metaphysics. His conclusion? Time is unreal. McTaggart's argument is not emotional or poetic. It's not about clocks or cosmology. It is a purely logical dismantling of our experience of temporal reality. In 1908, McTaggart published a paper titled The Unreality of Time, and in it, he introduced a now famous distinction between what he called the A series and the B series of time. This distinction would form the backbone of his argument that time, as we think of it, simply cannot exist. The A series is how we normally experience time. It divides events into three categories: past, present, and future. These are constantly changing. What was future becomes present, and then quickly slips into the past. This is the dynamic time we feel, the moving present, the passing now. The B series, in contrast, is a static ordering of events. It arranges all moments according to earlier than and later than relationships. In this view, an event, like your birth, is always earlier than your retirement, which is always later than your graduation. There's no motion, just a fixed structure of events. McTaggart argued that time requires change. Without change, there is no passage of time. But in his view, only the A series allows for change, because it is the only way events can genuinely move from future to present to past. The B series, being static, has no real flow. It's like a timeline drawn on a page, complete, consistent, but utterly unmoving. But then McTaggart does something remarkable. He turns on the A series and argues that it is logically incoherent. His reasoning is subtle but devastating. He points out that in the A series, every event must be past, present, and future, but it cannot be all three at once. These properties are mutually exclusive. An event can't be both present and past at the same time. Yet if time is real, every event must possess all three of these properties at different times. And to explain that, you must introduce another time series, a second timeline in which these properties change. But this leads to an infinite regress. You must explain the change of the first series with a second series, then the second with a third, and so on. This, McTaggart says, is impossible. Therefore, if the A series is contradictory and the B series is static, then neither can sustain real time. And if time cannot be supported by either model, then time, in any meaningful sense, is not real. It's a shocking conclusion. Time, which seems most immediate and undeniable, is a fiction, an illusion produced by the mind, not a feature of the universe. McTaggart does not deny that events occur or that things change in some sense, but he insists that what we call the passage of time, this flowing, ever-shifting present, is an error in our thinking. To many, this seems absurd. After all, what could be more real than now? What could be more immediate than the ticking of the second hand or the slow descent of the sun? But McTaggart challenges this very immediacy. He asks, what is now really? If we say now is a moment that is present and then becomes past, we are caught in contradiction. Now slips through our fingers. We cannot define it without invoking other moments, and we cannot make sense of those without assuming the reality of time, which is precisely what is under question. Modern physics, strangely, seems to echo McTaggart's concerns. Einstein's theory of relativity erodes the idea of a universal present. In relativity, what is now for you may not be now for someone moving quickly in another frame of reference. The division of time into past, present, and future becomes blurred, subject to perspective. In this light, time looks more like McTaggart's B-series, a block universe, where all events simply exist without flow, without becoming. This view is known as the block theory of time, or eternalism. In this picture, all of history, past, present, and future, is equally real. You reading this now are no more or less real than the version of you reading it tomorrow or yesterday. Time doesn't pass. You just occupy different locations along the timeline. The flow of time is an illusion generated by consciousness moving through this block. But McTaggart goes even further. He argues that not only is the flow of time an illusion, but time itself is an illusion, that what we experience as time is a projection, much like how space can appear curved or flat depending on our frame of reference. He is not saying that events do not happen, or that cause and effect are meaningless, but that these things do not require time in the way we commonly believe. This creates a strange dissonance. We continue to live as if time is real. We make plans. We reflect on memories. We grow old. But beneath these experiences lies a deeper structure, one that may not contain moments at all, but rather a vast, interconnected web of experiences without a ticking clock to govern them. And what if he's right? What would it mean to live in a world where time is not real? It might mean that our most painful regrets, our most joyful memories, are not gone, they are simply elsewhere on the map. It might mean that the future is not uncertain, but already woven into the structure of what is. It might mean that birth and death are not beginnings and endings, but simply coordinates in an eternal landscape. There is something freeing in McTaggart's vision. If time is unreal, then change does not erase what was. Every moment exists forever and completely. Your first steps, your last breath, they are all present somewhere. They do not fade into non-existence. They remain. And yet there is also something haunting. If time is not real, then neither is becoming. We are not traveling from who we were to who we will be. We are fixed, eternal, frozen. The idea of growth, of progress, of redemption, it all loses meaning, and that is hard to accept. But perhaps, instead of rejecting it, we can hold this idea like a dream. Let it sit with us quietly. Let it whisper its paradoxes in the background of our lives. Maybe McTaggart was not offering an answer, but a mirror, a way to reflect on the strangeness of time and how deeply it shapes everything we believe about ourselves. Time, after all, is not just a measure. It is a medium. It is the canvas on which we paint our stories. And if that canvas is an illusion, then perhaps our stories are even more fragile and more precious. So the next time you check the clock, or mark a birthday, or wait for tomorrow, remember McTaggart. Remember that the passing of time might be a trick of the mind, that what you call now may be just one point in an endless, changeless reality, that the world may not be unfolding, but already whole. And in that stillness, that eternal present, perhaps you'll find something deeper than time. Perhaps you'll find yourself. EPR paradox. In the deepest corners of reality, where the rules of the large no longer apply and logic seems to warp, quantum physics presents its most haunting question: can two particles, separated by vast distances, somehow remain mysteriously connected? This is the essence of quantum entanglement, a strange phenomenon that defies our common understanding of space, time, and cause. It is also at the heart of a powerful challenge to the foundations of quantum theory, the EPR paradox, proposed in 1935 by Albert Einstein, Boris Podolsky, and Nathan Rosen. To understand the paradox, we must first step into the strange world of quantum mechanics, a realm where particles don't have definite positions or speeds until they are measured, where outcomes are governed by probabilities rather than certainties, and where observing something can change what it is. In this world, particles like electrons and photons behave less like tiny billiard balls and more like ripples of possibility, existing in multiple states at once, until observed. This superposition, as it's called, is strange enough, but entanglement goes further. When two particles interact in a certain way, they can become entangled, a kind of quantum bond that links them forever, no matter how far apart they may drift. If you measure one of the particles, the other instantly assumes a corresponding state, even if it's light years away. This connection is not through space or signal, but something more immediate. Einstein famously called it spooky action at a distance. It seemed to him that this violated everything we know about how information can travel. After all, nothing is supposed to move faster than the speed of light. This is where the EPR paradox comes in. Einstein and his colleagues proposed it as a thought experiment, not to prove entanglement, but to challenge quantum mechanics itself. They believed that quantum theory, as powerful as it was, must be incomplete. Their logic was simple but deep. If quantum theory says a particle doesn't have a specific value until measured, and if measuring one particle instantly affects the other, even far away, then one of two things must be true. Either information travels faster than light, breaking the rules of relativity, or the particles must have hidden variables, properties determined in advance, just waiting to be revealed. Einstein leaned toward the latter. He didn't believe the universe could be so strange, so indeterminate. He once said, "God does not play dice with the universe." He was convinced that behind the veil of quantum probabilities, there was a deeper, deterministic layer, a hidden reality waiting to be discovered. The EPR paper was his way of saying quantum mechanics can't be the whole story. But the paradox wasn't resolved for decades. It remained a philosophical puzzle, a clash between two worldviews, one probabilistic and weird, the other deterministic and intuitive. Then, in the 1960s, physicist John Bell changed everything. He devised a way to test the predictions of quantum theory against the idea of hidden variables. His famous inequality, Bell's theorem, provided a bridge between thought experiments and real experiments. And when those experiments were finally carried out, first by Alain Aspect in the 1980s, and many times since, quantum mechanics won, the results showed clear violations of Bell's inequality. That meant the universe could not be explained by any local hidden variables. Something non-local, something faster than light, or outside of space and time was at play. Entanglement was real. And the EPR paradox was not a flaw in quantum theory, but a window into its deepest truth. This conclusion is both thrilling and disturbing. It means that reality is not what we thought. It means that particles can influence each other instantaneously across distance. It means that the universe is, at some level, entangled, woven together in ways we can't fully grasp. It challenges our notions of causality, locality, and even individuality. Consider this: if two particles are entangled, and you measure one, the state of the other becomes known, not gradually, not eventually, but instantly. No signal travels between them. No force crosses the space. It simply happens, as if the two particles are parts of a single, undivided system. This seems to imply that separation is an illusion, that the distance between things is not as absolute as we once believed. And yet, entanglement does not allow for faster-than-light communication. You can't use it to send messages or break the speed limit of the universe. The changes are instant, but unpredictable. It is a correlation, not a control. This preserves the letter of relativity, but not its spirit. The paradox remains, shimmering at the edge of what we can understand. The EPR paradox invites us to reimagine what it means for things to exist. Or do they only come into being when we look? Is the universe complete on its own, or is it somehow incomplete without an observer? These questions echo beyond physics. They reach into philosophy, consciousness, and the very nature of reality. Entanglement suggests that the world is not made of isolated parts, but of relationships, of connections that transcend distance. That what we call objects may be better understood as events, as patterns in a field of potential. That the universe is not a collection of things, but a web of interactions. Einstein resisted this view to the end. He never accepted that nature could be so strange, but quantum theory has passed every test. It powers our electronics, explains the sun, and predicts the behavior of atoms with uncanny accuracy. And yet, it leaves us with mysteries that seem more like poetry than physics. Entanglement is not just a feature of the quantum world. It is a riddle that sits at the heart of being. So what do we do with this mystery? We can't see entanglement directly. We can't touch it or feel it, but we can infer its presence, measure its effects, and wonder at its implications. It whispers of a reality more connected than we imagined, a reality where space and time are not barriers, but dimensions of a deeper unity. Some have suggested that entanglement points toward a hidden layer of the cosmos, a realm where all things are one. Others see in it the seeds of a new technology, quantum computing, where entangled bits could solve problems beyond the reach of classical machines. Still others see it as a metaphor for the interconnectedness of life, the invisible threads that bind us across space and time. In the quiet of night, when the mind is still, you might reflect on two particles, born together, flying apart, yet somehow still one. You might wonder if we too are entangled not just with each other, but with the universe itself, that beyond the noise and motion of everyday life, there is a field of presence, humming with possibility, waiting to be observed. The EPR paradox does not offer easy answers. It does not resolve the tension between determinism and randomness, between locality and unity. But it reminds us that reality is not what it seems, that beneath the familiar world is a mystery we are only beginning to glimpse. And in that mystery, perhaps, is something beautiful. Not a flaw. Why? Not a failure, but a doorway. Munchausen trilemma. We seek certainty. In science and philosophy, in everyday life, we want to be sure. We want our beliefs to rest on firm foundations. We want to trust that what we know is true, that our reasoning is sound, and that our understanding of the world is grounded in something solid. But what if every attempt to justify our beliefs ends in a paradox? What if every foundation we build crumbles under inspection? This is the haunting insight at the heart of the Munchausen trilemma, a philosophical problem that reveals a fundamental flaw in the structure of knowledge itself. The name comes from a fictional German nobleman, Baron Munchausen, who once claimed he pulled himself and his horse out of a swamp by tugging on his own hair. The trilemma is named after this absurd story because it describes the equally impossible task of justifying any claim to knowledge without relying on something else that also needs justification. In essence, it says this: any attempt to prove a truth leads to one of three unsatisfying options, and none of them can truly rescue us. The first option is infinite regress. Imagine you make a claim, the Earth orbits the Sun. You then offer a reason, because we observe its motion and the laws of gravity explain it. But then you must justify that reason. Why trust gravity? Why trust observation? You need another reason, and another, and another. The chain of justification stretches back forever, with no starting point. You are trapped in an endless loop of asking why, never arriving at an ultimate answer. It's like trying to walk up a staircase that never ends. The second option is circular reasoning. Here you try to justify a belief by referring back to itself in some hidden way. The Bible is true because it says it is the Word of God, and we know that because the Bible tells us so. Or reason is reliable because reason tells us it is. In circular reasoning, the proof loops around on itself, giving the illusion of support but offering none. It's like a snake eating its own tail, endlessly feeding on its own logic. The third option is axiomatic assumption. In this route, you simply stop asking for proof. You declare certain beliefs as self-evident, as foundational, and build everything else upon them. In mathematics, we begin with axioms. In science, we accept the laws of logic and causality without proof. But this raises the question, why these axioms? Why should we trust these foundations and not others? We are left with a leap of faith, not a demonstration of truth. Our certainty is anchored in assumptions we cannot justify. So there we are, caught in the trilemma. Every attempt to ground knowledge leads to infinite regress, circularity, or unproven assumption. None of these options is fully satisfying. Each one leaves us with a gap, and that gap sits at the very heart of epistemology, the study of knowledge. The Munchausen trilemma does not say we know nothing. It does not demand that we abandon reason, but it questions the ultimate grounding of our beliefs. It says that justification cannot go all the way down, that at some level we must stop. We must accept something without proof, whether we like it or not. This insight has profound implications. It undermines the dream of total certainty. It challenges the idea that knowledge can be built like a pyramid, rising from solid ground. Instead, it suggests that knowledge is more like a web, a network of beliefs supporting one another, but none resting on an absolute base. Some philosophers, like Karl Popper, embraced this implication. He argued that science should not aim for certainty, but for falsifiability. We should not try to prove theories true. Only try to test and disprove them. What survives these tests can be provisionally trusted, but never absolutely. Others, like Otto Neurath, compared human understanding to sailors repairing their ship at sea, never able to start from scratch, only able to patch and build while staying afloat. The trilemma also speaks to deeper existential themes. It suggests that meaning and truth are not given, but constructed, that our beliefs rest on choices, on what we decide to accept as a foundation. It reminds us that certainty is not a destination, but a stance. We choose our ground, not because it is unshakable, but because we must stand somewhere. And yet, this can be freeing. Once we let go of the demand for perfect certainty, we can engage with ideas more honestly. We can see knowledge not as a fortress, but as a garden, something cultivated, tended, and grown through dialogue, humility, and continuous questioning. We can hold our beliefs with confidence, but not arrogance. We can embrace doubt, not as weakness, but as wisdom. The Munchausen trilemma is not just a puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects the human condition, always seeking, never fully arriving, always asking, never completely answering. It teaches us to live with openness, to accept the limits of reason, and to find clarity not in foundations, but in the way we navigate complexity. In a world that often demands absolute answers, this trilemma invites us to slow down, to notice how often our reasons rest on deeper assumptions, to see how our explanations eventually circle back, to question what we take for granted. And in doing so, we may not find certainty, but we may find something more important, understanding. So the next time someone asks you, "Why do you believe that?" you might answer with care. You might trace your reasons back a few steps, but you'll know, deep down, that the ladder doesn't go forever. That at some point, you simply choose to trust your senses, your logic, your intuition, your experience. And that choice, though not absolute, is what gives your world coherence. The Baron may not have pulled himself from the swamp, but we too construct meaning from within the mess. We pull ourselves forward not because we have a foundation, but because we move, reflect, and choose. And perhaps, in the end, that is enough. Observer effect and the double-slit experiment. There is a moment in physics that feels more like poetry than science. A single experiment, elegant and unsettling, that seems to whisper secrets about the nature of reality itself. It begins with something simple, particles passing through slits, and ends with a question that still haunts us. Does the act of observation change what is real? This is the story of the double-slit experiment, and with it, the deep mystery known as the observer effect. Imagine a beam of light aimed at a barrier with two narrow slits, and behind it, a screen to catch whatever passes through. This is the setup, basic and ancient, first used to explore the nature of light. If light is a wave, we expect to see interference, bright and dark bands on the screen, where the crests and troughs of the waves meet. And indeed, when no one watches the slits, the light creates an interference pattern. It behaves like a wave, spreading out and interacting with itself. But here is where the mystery begins. We replace light with individual particles, photons, electrons, even atoms, fired one at a time. They pass through the slits alone, like tiny bullets, and yet over time, the same interference pattern appears. Somehow, each single particle seems to go through both slits at once, interfering with itself. It doesn't behave like a particle, but like a probability wave, a cloud of possibility, not a solid thing. Now we decide to ask a question. Which slit does the particle go through? We place a detector at the slits to observe the path. And with that, everything changes. The moment we measure which slit it passes through, the interference pattern vanishes. The particle behaves like a particle again. No more waves, no more mystery. Just two simple clusters behind the slits, as if the particle chose a path and stuck to it. This is the heart of the observer effect. The act of observation collapses the wave of possibilities into a single outcome. When unobserved, the particle behaves like a wave spread out, uncertain, multiple. When observed, it becomes definite, fixed, decided. It is as if reality does not take shape until we look at it, as if the universe waits for our gaze before making up its mind. This has stunned physicists for more than a century. It is not a flaw in the experiment. It has been repeated countless times, with electrons, photons, even molecules made of hundreds of atoms. Always the same result. When unmeasured, a pattern of waves. When measured, a pattern of particles. Observation is not passive. It is active. It changes what is. But what does it mean to observe? Is it consciousness? A camera? A sensor? In quantum mechanics, observation simply means interaction. When a quantum system interacts with the environment in a way that leaves a trace, it doesn't require a mind. But that doesn't make it less strange, because it means that reality behaves differently when it is entangled with something else, even something inanimate. This leads to deeper questions. Does the particle go through both slits until it is forced to choose? Is it in a state of superposition, existing in all possible paths at once, until a measurement makes it real? And if so, what is the role of the observer? Are we collapsing the wave? Are we co-creating reality? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the Copenhagen interpretation, say yes. The wave function is not physical, it is a mathematical description of what we know. When we observe, we collapse that knowledge into a single outcome. Others, like the many worlds interpretation, suggest something even more surreal, that the wave never collapses. Instead, every possible outcome happens in a branching multiverse, and we simply find ourselves in one of the worlds where a particular result occurred. But in either case, the central mystery remains. The act of observing changes the outcome. Before measurement, reality is not fixed. It is probabilistic. After measurement, it is decided. And we, as observers, are caught in the middle, both part of the process and subject to its whims. This challenges everything we assume about an objective universe. In classical physics, the world exists independently of us. Objects have properties. Causes lead to effects. But in quantum physics, the boundaries blur. Things do not have definite properties until measured. The world is not entirely independent of the observer. It is tempting to interpret this philosophically, to imagine that consciousness plays a central role in shaping the world. Some thinkers have taken this as evidence that mind and matter are deeply connected, that the universe is not a cold machine, but a participatory field of experience. Others caution against overreach, reminding us that quantum mechanics is precise and mathematical, even if our understanding of it is incomplete. Still, the metaphor remains powerful. We are used to thinking of ourselves as spectators of reality. But the double-slit experiment whispers that we may also be participants, that the world unfolds not just around us, but through us. The implications are vast, not just for physics, but for philosophy, metaphysics, and how we understand our place in the cosmos. If reality is shaped by interaction, if the future is not fixed until observed, then the universe is not a book already written, but a story that co-authors itself in every moment. The experiment is also humbling. It reminds us that what seems solid and certain is, at its core, uncertain and strange, that beneath the surface of everyday experience is a dance of probabilities, a fog of potentiality waiting to be measured, that reality is not made of things, but of possibilities. And perhaps, in this mystery there is beauty, because it means that nothing is fully determined, that there is room for surprise, that the world, at its most fundamental level, is not cold or mechanical, but alive with uncertainty. It pulses with the unknown, and we, in observing it, give it shape. When we fire a single electron through two slits, we are not just testing physics, we are touching the edge of understanding. We are brushing against a veil that separates what is from what could be, and that veil moves when we look. So the next time you stare at the night sky, or wonder about the nature of things, remember the double slit. Remember the strange dance between particle and wave, the quiet collapse of possibility into form. Remember that the universe is not fully made until it is seen, and that in seeing it, you are not just a witness, but a part of the story. Quantum immortality. There are ideas that whisper rather than shout, quiet, surreal thoughts that live on the edges of science and philosophy, where certainty ends and possibility begins. Among them is one of the most haunting concepts to emerge from the quantum realm, quantum immortality. A thought experiment not about the death of the body, but about the impossibility of experiencing it. Not a promise of eternal life, but a paradox of observation in a world that never chooses just one outcome. To understand quantum immortality, we must first understand the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. In most explanations of the quantum world, events are said to be probabilistic. A particle can spin up or down. An atom can decay or remain intact. When we measure the system, one outcome becomes real. But the many worlds interpretation, proposed by Hugh Everett in the 1950s, tells a different story. In this view, the wave function never collapses. Every possible outcome happens, but in separate, branching universes. Each time a quantum event occurs, the universe splits. One world for each possibility, infinite branches, infinite versions of you. This means that every choice you make, every roll of the dice, every twist of fate, splits reality into new pathways. In some universes, you turn left. In others, right? In some, you live. In others, you die. But you, the conscious observer, only ever experience the path where you survive, and that's where quantum immortality begins. Imagine a deadly experiment. You, alone in a room, press a quantum button. If a particular particle decays, you die instantly. If not, you live. According to the laws of probability, there's a 50-50 chance. But according to the many worlds interpretation, both outcomes occur in separate branches of reality. In one, you're gone. In another, you're still there, conscious and alive. Now imagine doing this again and again. Every time somewhere in the multiverse, there is a version of you who survives, who wakes up after the experiment, perhaps confused, perhaps amazed, but always alive. You may feel incredibly lucky, but in that version of reality, luck has nothing to do with it. Because by definition, you can only experience the branches where your conscious workings continues. You never experience the ones where you cease to be. Death is never observed. Only life is. This leads to the chilling implication of quantum immortality. From your own perspective, you may never die. The universe may continue to split again and again, placing your conscious experience in the timelines where survival, no matter how improbable, is always achieved. This doesn't mean your body is invincible. In most universes, you age, get sick, and eventually pass away. But you never find yourself in those branches. Your awareness skips over them. And so, from your point of view, existence never ends. But what kind of life would this be? If you always survive, what becomes of the world around you? In the early stages, things might seem normal. But as time goes on, you might notice that people you love pass away while you persist. That accidents happen, but somehow you escape them. That diseases worsen, but you remain awake. In time, you might reach a world where survival becomes unnatural, where your body fails, but your mind clings on. The path of least probability becomes your prison, and you drift through increasingly bizarre and unlikely realities, simply because your consciousness cannot stop observing. This is the dark mirror of quantum immortality. It offers not heaven, but an eerie limbo, a reality where the rules of quantum mechanics never allow your experience to blink out, where pain and time stretch on not because you want them to, but because they must, for as long as there is a version of you to observe them. Of course, this is only a thought experiment. There is no experiment we can perform to test it. We only ever experience one branch of reality, and we can never know what the others are like. But even as an idea, it forces us to confront deep questions. What is identity? What is the relationship between consciousness and reality? Can we ever experience our own non-existence? And if not, what does that mean for what we call death? Philosophers have long pondered whether death is ever truly experienced. The ancient Epicureans argued that we never perceive our own death, because when we are alive, death is not with us, and when we are dead, we are not there to perceive anything. Quantum immortality sharpens that idea. It says not only do we fail to perceive death, we may always find ourselves sidestepping it, one improbable escape at a time. Some see in this idea a strange comfort, the possibility that, even in the face of danger, something in us persists, that no matter what happens, there will always be a version of us who makes it through. Others see it as a curse, a lonely eternity, stranded in timelines where survival defies logic, where the world grows unrecognizable, and where no release ever comes. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect is how little we can say for sure. Quantum immortality is a ghostly implication of a particular interpretation of quantum mechanics. It is not a proven truth, but a philosophical reflection, a whisper of what might be if the rules of the cosmos are as strange as they seem. Still, the questions it raises are real. If consciousness is tied to observation and observation defines reality, then what role does the observer truly play? Are we passive witnesses or active threads in the fabric of existence? Is life something that unfolds before us or something that follows our gaze? In the quiet hours, when you lie awake and wonder what happens when the story ends, quantum immortality offers a peculiar reply. Perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps, from your own point of view, the path always continues, always extends. And if it does, then this life, the one you're living now, is one of infinite paths, one of endless forks, and you, the observer, will always be there to witness what comes next. It is not a comfort. It is not a warning. It is simply a possibility, a reflection of how fragile and mysterious consciousness really is, a reminder that we do not yet understand what it means to be aware, or to cease, or to continue. And so the idea remains drifting through the space between science and story, not quite falsifiable, not quite provable, but powerful in its silence,